When, for reasons unknown to anyone, humanity was plunged into chaos, a savior appeared to him from nowhere. With the abilities available, the Zeus system is able to materialize objects from the virtual world into the real world. It's been about 200 years since the world became a place where any game item can be materialized in reality. As a consequence, the modern era turned into a prosperous civilization, but as always, there was one but. In this civilization, there was cruelty, inequality, and oppression. Like everywhere else, people became like animals. Some people, feeling their superiority over others, began to humiliate those who are weaker. They behaved like real animals. Due to the rankings of the division of spheres of influence, as well as the appearance of items in the game of Olympus, there has been a polarization of wealth. The class system not being one is again ubiquitous in the human world. Here it is difficult for a clay spoon to turn into a golden spoon. And now our hero stood at the bottom of this class system. He only had to climb to the top. His name was Ha-Ju-Hyuk. He was one of the many clay spoons that would get lost among the masses. But thanks to being kidnapped one day by a crazy old man, the boy realized something. The old man said he had a gap in his abilities. So for the past 20 years, Han had only been going through the hellish training in the training area. He didn't know what rest was. Han was kind of told he was supposed to become totally evil or something, but the guy didn't remember. So he's with a holy priestess he meets along the way, an assassin who will soon come into his life in a very unexpected way. And also the queen of the afterlife who commands skeletons and other undead. He intends to become the ultimate evil in this world and enslave everyone he sees in his path, and nothing will stop him. But now he's just a little 6-year-old boy heading to the academy for training. After that, he'll go to work for the union like everyone else. Such a life seemed normal to him, but the boy didn't even realize that all this time, he was already being followed by a crazy old man. The strange grandfather with disheveled hair was already following the boy. His eyes glistened with anticipation. He had finally found his target. And the boy continued to go about his business, unsuspecting and singing some song under his nose. With just one small leap, the old man grabbed Han with his strong hand and dragged him away with him. The poor man didn't even have time to realize anything. This is how his difficult and long journey of becoming the ultimate evil began. It was torturous training. He hadn't even expected the training to be so exhausting. It was more like bullying, but the old man wouldn't listen. Instead of normal training, he was running away from a pack of wild hyenas trying to survive, and the old man didn't even think to help him. During the grueling workouts, the old man just sat there and did nothing, watching the boy be at his limit. Despite his students' chatter, the teacher seemed to let it all pass and just looked away. The old man sat on his student's back and made him do push-ups. Arthur was already 16 years old and had spent a good dozen years in training. The boy spoke of someone who had reached level 89 and was considered the best player in this world, but the old man didn't believe it. The teacher scratched his disheveled beard and frowned as his student seemed to doubt his mentor's words. Arthur gritted his teeth and continued his training, while the old man went back to his musings. In an excited voice, the crazy old man told Arthur to believe in him, because only he could make the boy the strongest player in the world. When the old man heard that the boy doubted himself, his face changed and his teeth gritted with anger. He brought his heavy fist down on his student's head and told him to shut up immediately and keep practicing. Poor Arthur cried when he heard that his teacher had ordered him to stand in this stance for another 3 hours. 20 years filled with pain and suffering passed in such hellish training, but Arthur patiently endured it all. And now the graying old man sat before him and said in a sad voice that he had taught Arthur everything he knew. Now he could go to the other world without any regrets. Arthur, sitting in front of him, listened to every word. Tears came to the boy's eyes. Even though it was a crazy old man who had kidnapped him, Arthur had grown attached to him. In reality, he was treated like a job seeker who hasn't been able to get a job for who knows how long. After all this, Arthur had already lost all hope for normal life, and that he would ever become great. And in the virtual world of Olympus, he had to devote his entire life to diligent training. Honestly, the boy himself didn't know why he continued to put up with all of this during this time instead of just deleting his character. But finally, he was able to stand the test. Arthur raised his head and turned to his mentor. In a trembling voice, he said that he was essentially the son of this old man, since he had no one but his mentor. But he still needs the support of his teacher. The old man looked at him with a good-natured look. A smile appeared on his dry lips. Of course, the boy was still weaker than him, but his skills had grown a lot. Arthur didn't pay attention to it, he just wanted a quest. Let him just give him a task, and let him go in peace. The The boy had heard that after the mentor goes to the other world, after him remains a quest. Arthur bowed and continued to ask. He might as well give him one small task before his end. Arthur continued to bow. The old man grinned and said he understood his feelings. May Arthur never forget that he was his apprentice, the only successor. With a dry hand, the old man handed the boy a small piece of paper on which was drawn a map, telling him to find the place. With gratitude and joy, the player accepted the piece of paper in his hands and thanked his mentor for his generous teaching that is higher than the sky and deeper than the ocean. The boy bowed again, hitting his head on the hard floor and getting everything he needed. Suddenly, the old man's body began to change, a strange aura flying around him, and his squeaky laughter could be heard. Arthur had to press himself to the ground so he wouldn't be blown away by the wind. The old man told his apprentice to go and finally conquer the world. When the player rose from his knees, his teacher had already gone to the other world, but remained in the same position. Now, everything was more or less clear, and Arthur turned around and headed for the exit. It was time to move on. With one last look at his mentor's breathless body, he wished him to rest in peace and left the cave. Stepping out into the fresh air, Arthur couldn't stop rejoicing. Finally, his torment was over. He immediately opened the status window. His memory flashed back to when his mentor had almost sent him to the other side a few times when the guy tried to escape. Passing the identification player saw that his stats at a fairly high level. Here, only luck went into the minus. Now Arthur was relieved of his position as successor. His status changed, and an aura began to form around his body. Now he could leave the area and go on a free journey. Taking a full breath, the player prepared himself. Breathing in the scent of freedom, Arthur looked off into the distance. He had waited 20 years for this moment, and it had finally come. But no sooner had the player crossed the threshold of his zone, as around began to pop up errors, Arthur did not even immediately realize what happened. Glancing at one of the windows, he read the inscription, "Abnormal level up method detected." With horror in his eyes, the boy read that all of his stats were about to be reset to entry level. He fell to the ground from the shock and lay like that for a while. The player still could not believe that all his 20 years of training had come to nothing. The tears were coming to my eyes, and Arthur was about to become hysterical, but I wondered if it would all just end like this. Opening the status window in hopes of seeing something new, Arthur jumped up from his seat and stared at his specs. Yes, his level dropped to level 1, but his stats stayed at the same level. Similar system, only reset the level. A smile immediately spread across his face. He is literally on level 1. In other words, this is the easiest place to climb up. In fact, his terms are extremely favorable. For further growth, Arthur's life will now take on a new meaning. That's just great news. With the map spread out in front of him, the player decided to head first to the newcomer's starting city. Without stopping smiling, the player applied a teleport spell and began to move to the city of Urkas. From this moment, his own life begins. In a few seconds, the environment changed, and the boy found himself in the center of the city, where people were bustling about and the atmosphere was lively. Breathing in the clean air, Arthur almost cried at how many years he had missed this square. And those street vendors always trying to sell their overpriced goods, it all seemed so familiar. The peaceful and carefree atmosphere completely enveloped Arthur's soul, and it felt incredibly good to finally have him back. From the overflowing joy of the player, almost cried on his eyes, tears were already beginning to glisten. Rolling up his sleeves, Arthur's first order of business was to head out to the hunting grounds to find some loot, and everything finally fell into place. In a few moments, he was already near the entrance gate to the city. There stood a guard dressed in armor. No sooner had Arthur crossed the border of the city than a sharp axe appeared in his face, blocking his path. In a stern voice, the guard asked what level the boy was, as apparently he wasn't going to let the player go any further. With some surprise, Arthur named his level and looked at the knight for a second. There was silence between them. The guard shook his head and sighed, saying that the boy had made a mistake at the gate and that he needed to go to the east exit. And here, the west gate for the first level is too dangerous. Unless, of course, the boy wants to go to the other side early. Taking a closer look, Arthur asked, "Is this the forbidden zone?" A guard stood nearby and watched. The knight shook his head irritably at the silly question. No, this was not the forbidden zone, but he strongly advised against it. With this level, Arthur can't even beat a normal toothy rabbit, so don't even try this madness. The guard wanted to say something, but Arthur pushed his axe away and strode forward excitedly. With a heavy sigh, the guard had already prepared for this poor guy to be eaten by the monster. But he didn't even listen. As he approached the monster, Arthur noticed that he had activated a new quest to alarm the Guardian of Nur. A smile spread across Arthur's face as the guard looks worried about him. Maybe we should show him the quest the player has received. The guard continued to watch the strange boy with a questioning gaze, and goosebumps ran down his spine. What's this kid doing? He's just standing next to a monster and waving at it. That rabbit could eat him in a second. It did not have to wait long. The rabbit changed. In his mouth appeared huge, sharp teeth, and the monster, with a scream, rushed at the boy. The guard was horrified and wanted to rush to his aid. The man shouted for the kid to finally turn around because he was being attacked by a monster. But it was as if Arthur didn't notice that the toothy monster was flying at him on purpose and just stood there smiling. The next moment, something strange happened. The guy made some sudden movements and hit the monster right in the stomach with incredible speed. A light flashed in the air, and immediately there was a notification that Arthur had defeated the toothy rabbit and received 1 gold. As if that's what it took, the player blew on his fist and sighed heavily, his face not expressing an ounce of excitement. Then the guards were even more surprised when Arthur, with only level 1, started throwing rabbits around like toys. The man just stood there staring at this sight with his mouth open in amazement, unable to believe his eyes. Running up to the boy, the guard said that he only has the 1st level. How can he fight monsters? But Arthur just smiled. Turning to the guard, the player, with a smile on his face, said that the guardsmen are basically watching the level, but the man was still unable to believe that he was seeing what kind of machinery he was seeing for the first time in his life. Arthur squinted his eyes and said it was just a company secret, but behind him was a huge boar preparing to attack. Now, even the knight was already frightened, but the player just looked himself over his shoulder with full readiness. The rabid boar looked at them with fierce eyes, steam coming out of its nostrils, and nothing good could be expected from this beast. The knight ordered him to stand back and readied his spear, but Arthur assured him that there was nothing to worry about. Now everything would be quick. As soon as the boar approached them, Arthur struck it in the stomach in one deft movement and threw the animal back. Then the player victoriously raised his hand. His level increased as soon as he destroyed the monster. The surprised guard only looked at the boy's back and could not believe how he was able to defeat such a monster. So crazy. Meanwhile, the quest was completed. The player was credited 30,000 gold as a reward for the fulfillment. But then the player thought about it. Even if so, investing in his characteristics will not work because they are already at the maximum level. Waving his hand at the still surprised guard, Arthur went about his business, leaving the man completely bewildered. Now, the main problem is not that you need to go to high-level hunting grounds to finally have some fun. At the time, Arthur thought the road of his life was perfectly straight. 20 years of hard training has finally won him the reward. But a few days later, a horrible realization came to him. He had Hao A's system activated, and now players can distinguish the assassin's mark. Over the past few days, events have changed dramatically, with players attacking Arthur literally out of nowhere. He had to hide in the city to keep a low profile. Everyone mistook him for a wanted criminal. That's a problem. Next to him hung a poster of the real criminal, who was completely different from Arthur's appearance, and how could they be confused? It wouldn't happen without a reason. No matter how much the player thinks about it, it's probably because of his luck, which went negative. As Arthur stood behind the wall to hide behind the corner of the building, his back, the silhouette of another player, had already appeared. Constantly, everyone wanted to send him to the other world and get a reward for destroying the criminal. It created a lot of inconvenience. As soon as the stranger came at Arthur from behind, the boy turned around and gave him a powerful kick, knocking him backwards. The player immediately vanished into thin air. His session was over now. Arthur was the most notorious criminal in town. He even went into full Hao mode. Near his body now had a black aura flying around his body, which meant that he was destroying other players. And now he was hunted not only by NPCs, but also by players who had to run away every time a quiet minute just wasn't there. Everyone who came after him wanted to destroy him and get the reward because they thought Arthur was a serial assassin. The unfortunate kid was running away from them with his last strength. I agree, in the opposite hero system to Hao's, you can become a hero by destroying a Hao site. And now, absolutely all the resident players who wanted to become heroes took Arthur as their target and tried to destroy him. At one point, Arthur hit a dead end. He only looked over his shoulder at his pursuers in his eyes. Anger burned in his eyes. In the end, to survive, he was left with nothing else but to destroy all those who pursued him, only so he could stay alive. So 2 weeks went by, and he had to destroy players one by one and still level up. He sat on a rock and reasoned if he was already such a bad guy, he should look out for his own well-being, and Arthur stopped being a hero. If you think about it that way, he was forced into this mode and forced to destroy other players. There was simply no other choice. What was behind it, the player could not understand in any way. What was the meaning and idea? Perhaps it was some special scenario. He continued to wonder about it as suddenly the next day something strange happened to him. In front of Arthur kneeled people, there were 7 of them, that in general here the guy did not understand anything and just stood still. The most important of them, an old man with gray hair, smiled and said that they were honored to see the successor of the Absolute. All the old men immediately began to praise Arthur. The player just stood in front of them and did not understand anything. The old men shouted only one word, "Glory, what is this even?" Looking at his information plate, Arthur found that he had received a 300 rank quest. This puzzled him greatly. Upon reflection, the player realized that quests of this nature were major scenario quests that are conducted at least on a national level. And the old men continued to lie bowed before him and await further orders as if they were only waiting for him. A smile appeared on Arthur's face. Perhaps Zeus had been preparing him for this all these 20 years, and maybe Arthur was about to become part of a bigger story. The Age of Chaos lasts for 7,000 years, and the most powerful nation has an absolute ruler to whom everything obeys. Arthur began to read the contents of the biography of the chief ruler, which turned out to be quite long, while the old men continued to bow. Shelter inherited the devil's blood and became so much more violent than anyone else. It is said that he was feared by all the heroes in the world. However, when the rebellion broke out, he was defeated, but not sent to the other world, only crippled, and life remained in his body. Thinking about it, Arthur realized that perhaps his mentor was a descendant of the villain, or someone of his lineage. Looking at the plaque, the hero wondered if he would get full recognition, but find himself in a difficult situation. Maybe he would even be banned from joining the game. At this point, the unfortunate kid realized that he got into a very serious story, and it seems that the game system decided everything for him. So no matter what the means, the end must still be reached. Arthur looked up at the sky. Turning back to the old men, he clarified, "So it was the heavenly devil elders, right?" The old men twitched. The foremost white-haired grandfather nodded and immediately hit his forehead on the ground, shouting that they were in awe as soon as they learned that the overlord had returned. Arthur smiled again. Of course, he didn't remember anything about the elders, for it had only been a few minutes since he'd gotten up to speed. But still, Arthur remembered something of his mentor's words. The elder raised a broken forehead and cried with happiness. As he continued bowing and banging his head on the ground, the elder cried, "It seems that these are the same 7 elders who sympathize with him a lot." Seemingly with nothing to do, Arthur smiled and said that now let them lead him. It was time to get on the road. The chief elder obediently bowed his head. They are unquestioningly ready to listen to their master and lord. The answer to the question of why it's so quiet here came to itself. The elders said that they had wiped out all the insects in the neighborhood. In addition, the experience earned by the elders is retroactively assigned to the player. Arthur frowned as his level increased more and more. Eventually, without doing anything, the player reached level 9 just because the elders were destroying monsters in the neighborhood. And then another ingenious idea came into his bright head that he should use this wonderful opportunity wisely. Walking closer to his new followers, Arthur asked the name of the main man. An old man with gray hair said his name was Luxo. Continuing to hover over the old man, Arthur said that, first of all, he needed to clarify something. The man nodded his head. Closing his eyes sadly in voice, the player said that he was currently under the pressure of some restrictions, so he couldn't reveal his power. He remembers his teacher's instructions, but now due to circumstances, he can't use any of the techniques his head remembers, but his body doesn't listen. Bowing his head in a sad voice, Luxo replied that they guessed that something like this had happened, and in great sorrow. But immediately Arthur came to his senses with complete confidence in his voice and told them to trust him completely to the summit. Hearing such words, the old men raised their heads, and with tears in their eyes, began to praise their lord with renewed vigor, the heavenly devil. Elder's sympathy was growing with every second. "Oh, this is not a bad indicator," Arthur smiled. Back in the real world, Han went to the kitchen and drank a glass of water. This trip had made him a little tired. Suddenly he was called out by someone's loud voice. The guy turned to the side and with some irritation asked what was wanted of him. A girl with long golden hair stood on the doorstep and happily said that she had heard that since their union had won the quest, it was Seiya, his younger sister. Han almost choked on the water and asked him again. It was really true, and he even shivered a little in surprise. The one being hunted uses paired pistols. His level is too high to be caught by even a few people. But it seems the younger sister was encouraged if she succeeded she could get a compensation of 3 million gold from her union. In response to her brother's bewilderment, the girl said that nevertheless, their union gave quite a lot compared to others. The smile on her sister's face was growing with every second, so somehow if she got encouragement, she would definitely buy a lot of meat. Seiya looked at her brother with pity and said that they hadn't been eating meat lately, which was probably why her brother had bags under his eyes. After that, Han almost choked on water again. Maybe it was because his luck had run out, but thanks nonetheless. When Arthur moved back into the game world, he immediately received a notification that someone was following him, but the guy didn't see anything. It was a player named Luna. The first thing that came to mind was perhaps Arthur's younger sister. The guy immediately inquired. But no, it was not. The little sister behind the back of the player formed a silhouette from which emanated a very bad aura, heard a nasty voice. Turning around, Arthur saw the paired pistols in his hands and a savage look on his face. Coming out, it was the same Getrag from the wanted ad. The criminal looked at Arthur with a contemptuous look. He said that he would destroy the underling immediately, and Arthur would pay for his sin. Arthur sighed. It was good that his sister had shared this information with him. Even though he had high characteristics, the enemy had a high level. Getrag had already readied his weapon and moved forward. I wonder what variables their difference would create. A wide smile appeared on Arthur's face. It's not like he has to fight this opponent alone. Without wasting a second, Arthur summoned Elder Luxo, and the man immediately appeared literally out of nowhere, landing on the ground. The criminal was in a bit of shock as to where this old man had come from. His presence was not felt at all, so he must have been hiding somewhere. Meanwhile, Luxo was approaching the criminal waving his longsword. Now he would destroy him by order of his master immediately. Feeling his advantage, Getrag drew 2 pistols. If you think about it, there's only an old man and a green rookie here, so there's nothing to be afraid of. But no sooner had the man even pulled the trigger than his head separated from his body and flew to the ground. Standing beside the body of the defeated Luxo, hid his sword in its scabbard and sighed heavily. The job was done. Arthur was astonished to the core. He hadn't expected that an ordinary old man would be so fast and agile to deal with such an opponent. In the meantime, the elder simply walked past the defeated enemies as easily as if it was an ordinary thing for him. Admittedly, Arthur couldn't even immediately see Luxo's footsteps. Should have been a little more careful with this man. The boy shivered. Approaching the boy, the old man presented him a pouch with the head of the enemy player, even twitched a little in surprise. Taking the sack in his hands, Arthur begged with happiness. For destroying such a high-ranking criminal, he would receive as much as 100 million gold. A little cheered up, Arthur ordered to listen to him carefully for the sake of his glorious ascension. All must hunt all living things. It is now their goal. For the next 2 weeks, that's all they did was hunt to enhance their overall experience. Luxo was destroying everything in his path, thus increasing the experience of his lord, and Arthur was just walking along. The boy was already level 13. Some people take years to level up, but he could do it in a matter of days. To conquer the sky-conquering mind technique requires at least level 40 when Arthur reaches it. That's when it's a real head start. Another idea was born in his head, a company that gets items using full-scale pumping. On the other hand, if Arthur can't get a job on his own, he can simply start his own company. The player looked at the head sack. Now the only problem is how to get rid of this thing and get the money. While in his room, Hans scoured the forums looking for places to sell expensive items. As he is drawn into a total chaos mode, Arthur cannot use any of the official sources. In the game, in the real world, the same problem. Suddenly, Seiya walked into the room and greeted her brother with a smile on her face. Han even twitched a little. The boy was glad his sister came just in time. Seiya asked, did he really need pocket money again? A smile still shone on her face. Han was even a little embarrassed now. It's not that the player laughed a nervous laugh. He asked his sister what she would do if he managed to get Getrag's head. Seiya didn't even realize what he was talking about. Why would he even give up his head? He could just sell it and eat a lot of hamburgers. Han grimaced. He said he'd get that head by all means, and then they'd split the profits equally. That'd be fair. The guy frowned. The frightened Seiya didn't understand why her brother was suddenly talking in such a serious tone of voice and what kind of nonsense he was talking about. In a frightened voice, the girl asked Han, knows perfectly well what this person's supposed level is. It is simply impossible. After scratching the back of his head, Han said that, to be honest, he had already succeeded in catching the culprit. His sister still didn't believe it and looked at him. In response to the guy said that he just hit him good and he went to the other world. By the way, Han has approximately 99th level. The events moved back 10 years. It was then that Han sent his sister a screenshot of his level. Seeing the result of his brother, the girl got cold. Apparently he is very hard lately since he even stooped to such things. And now she was very embarrassed. At that moment she thought it was some kind of Photoshop. Han shivered. In principle, it was logical. Sitting back in his chair, Han said that if she wanted a head, she should go to the Leprean Mountains where she would find what she needed. But after her brother said that he had gone into full chaos mode, Seiya was completely speechless. She couldn't believe that her brother was capable of such a thing. But having gone to the world of the game, Seiya came to the guards and said that she had urgent business in the Leprean Mountains. With a disbelieving look at her, the soldier said that she, in a flash, Oko, will go to the other world, if only going there is a very bad decision. Without any hesitation, the girl said it was all right, because sooner or later, everyone comes back to life. The guards had no choice but to let the girl pass for last. They shouted that if she didn't come back, don't let her blame them. 3 hours later, the girl was already walking along the forest path around were tall trees. The atmosphere was slightly eerie. Seiya knew that her brother had dealt with all the monsters he'd told her about, but it was still a little scary. The image of a cocky Han, who was saying in a cocky voice that he would destroy all the monsters in the area and not to worry too much, arose in his mind. She continued to think and didn't notice when Arthur appeared behind her and lightly put his arm around her shoulder. The girl, who had not expected anything like this, cried out in fear and almost went to the other side of the world before her time. As soon as she was sure her brother was there, she started screaming. He could have at least warned her of his presence. How can you be so intimidating? But then she noticed something else behind her brother's back. There was a dark energy spreading everywhere, like her brother wasn't lying about the chaos. Anyway, Arthur has something for her. The guy opened the notifications window and his sister just stared at him in disbelief. Soon, in the hands of the boy was a bag with the head of this very criminal. The player immediately extended it to his sister. The astonished girl could not immediately believe what she was seeing. She thought she was asleep, and it was not real. It could not be. Seiya looked at her brother. She couldn't believe that she was holding such a huge amount of money. Until now, it appeared that her brother was playing a joke on her, but it was real. Soon, they entered a tavern, where they needed to turn in a quest. At the entrance hung a sign with Libra on it. A woman with a smiling face confirmed that it was indeed the head of the very criminal they were looking for, all right. The quest counted, and the woman pulled out a small chest of money. Seiya was still in shock. She couldn't believe it. As soon as the girl heard how much money she would get for completing the task, she caught her breath. If this is really not a joke, then she will be able to buy all kinds of her favorite hamburger. In front of her eyes immediately appeared delicious. She remembered how her brother used to vomit all the time because of the strain. The little sister looked at her brother with pitying eyes and was very sad that her brother was suffering. The girl came to her brother and handed him a bag containing 99 million gold coins. Arthur even wondered a little why she was giving him almost everything. They had agreed to split the reward equally. With a smile on her face, the girl replied that she just couldn't take half of it away from him. It was his money earned by honest labor. And yet Arthur wanted to say something, but his sister wouldn't listen to anything, and he felt a little lousy inside. His sister just waved goodbye, saying she needed time off and she'd buy a lot of hamburgers, so don't let him stay too long. Looking at her, Arthur smiled warmly and wished that she would take care of herself. He loved his sister immensely for such directness. The guy moved on. He had a really huge sum in his hands, even with the commission. As expected, this is the quest of a lifetime. The most important task has not yet begun, and he already has so much money in his hands. If he passes it, he can't even imagine how much money he will get. There was so much confidence in my soul that I need to accelerate my growth for a minute, at least even for a second. Investing in the future is cash, isn't it? That same night, Han asked his SIS to buy the items instead of him. The guy had a lot of other things to do. Seiya. With obvious annoyance, she looked at her brother and fiddled with what else he wanted. Why so quickly? She just got home from work and wants to rest, but Han said that if everything goes as planned, he will give her 300,000 every month. After haggling for 500, The sister agreed and got into the virtual machine. It felt like she was working overtime. After a few hours of hard work and labor, everything was finished, and the sister was barely breathing from exhaustion, and Han was very satisfied. During this time, they managed to get a lot of artifacts that increase experience. Yes, and they cost about 70 million. Hearing such a sum, Arthur was simply amazed that this was the first money he had ever earned. But his sister was ready to go to the other side of the world from fatigue. She didn't know why he'd asked her to buy all this stuff, but if he was going to force her further in the future, let him set up a teleportation point. A little embarrassed, Arthur nodded his head. Of course he would do it, but how much does it cost, since the teleport is also paid for? When he found out that each one, teleportation cost 3 million, and the money slipped through his fingers like sand. There's nothing to do from now on to earn more. Arthur laughed nervously and opened the information window. He ordered the elders to move out, and the loyal servants followed him without the slightest hesitation. The next day, he had already reached the Jeff Mountains. Arthur was walking along a forest path and did not notice that they were already being watched through a tree. The stranger squinted his eyes and took a closer look at what the kid was going through. After a closer look, the man realized that this strange boy was a chaosite, so there was a bounty on his head. 2 men peeked out of the nearest bushes. If they catch this kid, they'll get a big reward, so it's worth a shot. Besides, he looks weak. Yes, and his items are basic. He must have started first on the way here many times. One of the attackers took a closer look. He didn't know everything, but this kid couldn't even detect them. A few more men prepared to fight and drew their weapons. One way or another, we had to catch this kid and get the reward for him. In the meantime, Arthur simply moved forward without noticing any danger. There were no monsters in the area and everything was relatively quiet. But suddenly, the player felt that his body was about to be taken over by outside forces. Arthur stopped behind his back was already a warlock. The wizard marveled that this stranger could easily resist his spell. The knight standing next to him froze in place. The archer, sitting in the nearby bushes, has already drawn his arrow. He just needs to destroy this guy to become a hero. It's not hard at all. Knight ordered to stop coddling and finally grab him. Captain distracts this kid, so no time to waste. At once, they all rushed at Arthur, readying their weapons. The boy seemed to have noticed them beforehand and stood motionless. In a completely calm voice, he said that they could survive if they retreated now, otherwise they were finished. In a loud voice, the knight bellowed that this was utter nonsense. They would destroy him now and be rewarded. The warrior struck a blow, but nothing happened. Arthur asked in a calm voice, as if nothing had happened, what their level was. The bandits continued to attack him, but their weapons were completely useless. It just bounced off the armor. Even the arrows had no effect. The attackers decided to pincer the guy to prevent him from getting out. He didn't respond to any damage. The archer continued to cover his target with a hail of arrows, but even that didn't work. 3 strong players attacked him, but Arthur didn't even move. A great sword of level 40 build would pull about 20 armor. Doesn't fit. Arthur didn't even see them conjure. The archer shouted to the knight that it seems this man had prepared for the fight in advance and came prepared. The knight couldn't believe it. At this point, Arthur just stood motionless and waited for something interesting. The guy even already started to get bored. Nothing special. If he can't use his skills yet, he'll try his fists. A dark aura began to form near his body, and Arthur got into a fighting stance. The frightened swordsman shouted for everyone else to be careful. The enemy is preparing a magic move. Everyone stand back. But Arthur let all this pass by and was already preparing his most powerful blow. A second later, a pop was heard. A second later, the knight felt such a jolt in his chest that he could not stand on his feet. The man was shocked that this is even who this kid is. The next fighter was already running towards the kid, waving a huge hammer. Now it will turn this criminal into a stain, but Arthur was ready for it. He only needed one hit to defeat his opponent, who was just a distraction tank, his Cineros as somehow not giving a damn. The rest of the team only had time to watch their commander fall unconscious. The last thing the archer heard from his commanders was that they needed to run away. This was not a man they could handle. The man turned and ran away, ordering the others to run away if they wanted to live. But it wasn't that simple. Arthur took one big leap and grabbed his shoulder. The archer jerked and froze in place. A smile appeared on the player's face. This attacker was so confident when jumping on him, now running away. The archer was horrified at how this man could cover such a distance in such a short time. It was impossible. One man, high-level hunter, Hunter Rufinol. Didn't they have the good fortune to meet just him? It was only a few seconds before Arthur had easily dealt with the rest of them, and in the meantime, his level had risen to 16th. Things were going as well as could be expected. Luxo landed somewhere nearby and turned to his overlord. The man was concerned about something. The elder said he had something to show us, and we should follow him. And I could tell by the look on his face that it was really something important. To his great misfortune, the player realized too late that to go very far, they were already in the lair of the heavenly devil. They had to go a whole week. Soon, the company came to a portal that somehow was in the center of the desert. Well, okay, if they have already come, there is nothing to do. It was good to be able to speed up, but after a week of walking at a normal pace, it looked like a mockery. No animals or monsters, nothing in their path. They did not notice. Even when the characteristics were at maximum still, Arthur felt at the limit. To Arthur's great relief, he heard that they had already arrived, and the boy's eyes lit up. But it was too early to rejoice. The village was a pitiful sight, the usual ruined houses and almost no people. The player was even slightly surprised this place is definitely here, but the elder assured that they are in the right place. All the joy evaporated in a flash. It was like a blow to the head. Did they really bring him all the way out here for an abandoned village? After a while, the inhabitants crawled out of the destroyed houses, and they looked bad to say the least. People immediately started to rejoice. In addition, Arthur received a quest to rebuild the village. He should have rebuilt himself first, instead of building it. Soon the leader of the village, Prophet Carls, appeared. He was 163 years old, and it's a wonder how he stayed on his feet. The elder invited Arthur to his humble dwelling, where the boy decided to ask if it was really all that bad. He wondered if it was impossible to bring supplies from outside so people wouldn't starve. With a heavy sigh, the old man said that it was impossible. All the villagers, including the elders, are imprisoned here. It is impossible to bring anything from outside. In the end, the first thing Arthur has to do is to feed the people and lean to stop their dwelling. He immediately summoned his assistant, and Luxo instantly appeared in front of him as if he had grown out of the ground. Asking how long people can live without it, Arthur got a discouraging answer at most. Until the full moon matters badly. The player sighed heavily and rose to his feet. The situation is more difficult than expected, but there is nothing to do. When he got to the big mountain, Arthur shouted for all the people to pay attention to him, and the people started to turn their heads looking for a sound. With some blame in the voice, the player said he was aware of how hungry they were, but because of his daily training, he couldn't take care of them in time. But now, everything will change. He will take the reins and help all those in need. Tears of joy began to well up in people's eyes. Arthur immediately noticed that his eloquence increased, and NPC loyalty increased. He gained new fans. Arthur ordered Luxo to follow him and the rest of the elders to stay here and help in any way they could, and the man bowed his head obediently. The two of them had left the village with no time to spare, so they had to do their best to help these poor souls. When they get outside, we need to mop up all the monsters if any mana stones or items appear. Let them carry them here. Luxo nodded his head. In an hour, almost everything was ready, and the assistant admired his master. He was able to prepare it all in 1 hour without much difficulty. Arthur just smiled benevolently. Of course, he didn't expect anything else of himself, although he had to work hard. In order to get back quickly, he cleared a path and gathered whatever was at hand, but perhaps that doesn't seem to be enough. The events moved to a few days ago. Seiya was walking through the city on her own business. Around again people, the girl did not pay any attention to them. Suddenly, a notification from Seiya's system popped up in front of her face a bit. She stopped and shrieked. It was a request from her older brother. He asked her to bring him 800 cans of porridge and a magic pouch. The unhappy girl only sighed. Eventually, she got to the location and started asking why her brother needed all this, but Arthur said he would pay for it all. He put a blue stone in her hand, and her sister immediately wondered at his sponsor showing up, at which Arthur only laughed. The boy said she could sell it and take 10% for herself. Seiya opened her eyes in surprise. This thing is incredibly expensive. All she had to do was turn around and fulfill the request. Apparently her brother had gotten very lucky. Arthur also asked her to buy 3 teleporters. Buy teleport, assign a teleport point, and the matter is in the bag. He managed to drastically reduce the time that would have taken more than a week if they had walked. Everything went perfectly. Teleports, of course, came out very expensive, but it was worth it. Yes, and besides, will pay off very soon. 12th Elder Eder sat in his tent and pondered. The overlord had left the village, leaving the border unattended. The man became furious. Since he called himself the successor, then let him at least be more discreet. It was as irresponsible as possible. Bad thoughts settled in the man's mind. Let the other elders follow as they wish. If the heavenly devil even harmed him, I didn't want to think about it. But his musings were interrupted by Scream Absolute, returning with such a huge pile of food that he couldn't believe it. The man came out of the tent, and there were already a lot of people looking at the gentleman with tears in their eyes. And there was a lot to see. Arthur was standing near a pile of canned food jars, so many of them that the eyes were scattered. Arthur smiled and said that the food had arrived. He wanted to give them milk and honey, but if they ate too much at once, they might get sick. Edard's eyes bulged so much that they were about to fall out of his head, and how the Overlord had managed to get so much food here. There were tears glistening on the faces of the villagers. Finally, after a long time, they will be able to have a proper meal. This is a real blessing. After this, the poor citizens began to glorify their lord even more, and their loyalty grew like yeast. Arthur could not be pleased. Arthur ordered the other elders to divide the porridge among the rest of the people and let them eat it. Entering the tent, the player began to ponder. Food and shelter needs improvement for now. He will have to work harder than before. Suddenly, Edard's voice was heard. He asked to come in. Arthur turned and nodded his head. The man walked inside, tears glistening in his eyes. He didn't even immediately find the words to express his gratitude. The unhappy elder felt incredibly guilty for his lack of trust and immediately threw himself on his knees. Nearly crying, he cried out that he had dared to doubt his lord, but now he sees that Arthur is their true leader and great ruler. The guy was a little taken aback. He thought it was some kind of long-term project, but now it's a whole sect. On the other hand, it's just fine. His eyes lit up with renewed vigor. It's even better. The more loyal people, the better. He walked up to the elder and put his hand on his shoulder in a fatherly way. Edder was even a little startled by this show of attention. The man looked at him with frightened yet grateful eyes. Arthur took a seat next to him and began to speak. He said that so far there is a lot missing, and that his opportunities are too much limited by his current situation. And Arthur is well aware that right now, for the time being, few people believe him. If he were them, he would do the same. The elder continued to stare gratefully. In the most good-natured voice possible, Arthur said that he would repay everyone for their trust. So don't let him worry. After such a heartfelt speech, the elder's cheeks were completely flushed with tears, and shame had completely taken over his mind. Everything was going as it should within himself. Arthur just exulted with happiness. His plan had succeeded. The main thing was to choose the right words, and then everything would be as it should be. Next, they headed into the Leprious Mountains to fight monsters. The first on their way was a huge bear popping out of the bushes. With incredible weariness in his eyes, Arthur looked at the beast he was seeing. A bear here for the first time. Is this even normal? Eddard, standing behind him, drew his sword and offered to destroy the monster, but Arthur replied that he would try it himself. Usually such a huge monster would be caught in a group, but now we should try to do it solo. The bear swiveled his head, but Arthur had already prepared to strike. He was preparing a fist charged with energy. The monster was only one, so it was no big deal. Just once was enough to make the huge bear carcass fall to the ground, a case made somehow even too easy. The elder standing nearby marveled at the power of his lord, but Arthur was troubled, staring at his defeated foe. The bear was lying down and seemed ready to cry he is too weak, or it is Arthur too powerful. In any case, it is good. Their next destination was the Amantium dungeon. The loyal follower went with his lord, without a shadow of a doubt. A few days later, they had already come to the place where the portal to the dungeon was. The elder noticed that there were many footprints. It's easy to explain these dungeons were designed for beginners. It's near the city and not particularly dangerous, so there are a lot of low-level players. Inside himself, Arthur still marveled at how he'd put down the giant bears, just how strong the instructors from the big union were worth checking out sometime. Having finished thinking, the guy moved forward, ordering the elder to follow him. The man obediently bowed his head. In the safe zone of the dungeon, there were already a few players, 2 guys advancing and creepily afraid. One of his friends said that he would like to clean the dungeon completely today, but he didn't have time to say anything because he saw something. In front of them stood a strange man who emanated a sinister aura so frightening that the friends rushed back. They immediately reported to the instructor that there was a chaosite near them. The man did not immediately believe it, but apparently the disciples were not lying. Arthur, at this time, continued to hunt monsters and came to one conclusion: when he destroys them with his hands, items do not fall out. Opening the status window for the 100th time, Arthur hoped there would be something there. But no, because of his luck going deep into the minus side, he didn't get any items even basic. It would have been nice to just let the elders deliver the final blow, but no, his musings were interrupted by someone's voice from behind him. From the cave appeared a man, dressed in what appeared to be a union uniform, one of the instructors, as Arthur looked at him in surprise. The sister's warning that I said there would be a lot of union instructors in that dungeon immediately came to mind. The man kept asking what Arthur was doing here, but the boy resented being treated this way. The instructor continued. He said he had seen many like Arthur, and if he left the dungeon now, it was possible the man would let him live. The instructor applied his scanner, and his eyes glowed green. He wanted to get a better look at this man. 19th level, no items at all, hardly any equipment at all, no available skills, what he even forgot here. Making sure there was no threat from the stranger, the instructor began to taunt. What a pity, and how Arthur was going to fight. Hearing such nonsense, the player was even a little surprised. Why would he attack the students? He didn't want to stir up conflict, so Arthur told them to ignore him and he would just clean up the dungeon and be done with it. But no, they were not destined to part so easily. Instructor continued to pour dirt on him. It was already starting to get on Arthur's nerves. Behind the instructor's back, the students immediately appeared and the man told them not to be afraid of anything. Now it would all be over. A timer appeared. The man continued to sneer even. At Arthur's request to stay out of the way, he only became more agitated. By the clock in his head, the guy said he wasn't going to deal with the students. His goal was just to clean up the dungeon, so why don't they split up? But it was too late. The dungeon safe zone had automatically deactivated due to the appearance of a full HOW player, and now they would fight. Without listening to the instructor, the man lost his head and wanted to prove his superiority. Arthur tried his best to warn one last time to avoid conflict, but it seemed no one was even going to listen to him. This only infuriated the instructor. Some guy dares to treat him so disrespectfully, it's just unthinkable. And after flying a few more meters, the knight reached his goal, but the sword did not even touch the body of his opponent. Arthur remained in his place. A wry smile appeared on the player's face, and his eyes glistened, and that's what his entire attack. What a shame. The instructor, who didn't expect anything like this, froze in place. This kid doesn't look like an experienced player, but there is something about him as he blocked the attack. The instructor was horrified at how a chaosite of this level could stand up to him. But Arthur was unstoppable. He'd warned me he'd come here just to clean up the dungeon. Now they were finished. It was only a few seconds before the air lit up with a bright flash. Blego managed to block the blow in time. The sword didn't last long, and the instructor was horrified to see his weapon just cracked in half, as this kid was able to destroy it with a single blow. It was an emergency. The students only stood behind and watched their mentor fail. An enraged Arthur looked at the other students and asked in a growling voice. They were going to fight them too. The students made the only wise decision and shook their heads negatively. Well, at least something good. After that, Arthur continued his journey. Even if he was a bad guy, he had no intention of fighting with the students. Soon, he was at the place in front of him stood a huge tower. Looks like it was the same defensive fortress. Near stood a whole army of skeletons. First, we have to deal with this little thing, and then we can start the main course. A smile on my face, and it's getting fun. Since he won't get any items for destroying monsters anyway, it would be better to just quickly destroy this fortress, and that's it. 10 blows should be enough to destroy this wreck. Arthur's face lit up with a grin. Finally, something worthwhile. In 2 leaps approaching the tower, the guy struck the first crushing blow. The wall began to crack. The skeletons didn't even know how to approach their opponent, and the guy kept destroying the fortress. To his great surprise, the fortress collapsed literally in 1 blow. Somehow even strange, but anyway, it is good. Arthur ran forward. A little later, other players who wanted to clean up the dungeons came to this place, but only faced with the ruins of the fortress. This was the very support people were wondering how a 19th level novice could single-handedly destroy such a powerful fortress. Yeah, and besides, he didn't even touch a single monster. He just broke it, and then somehow it doesn't make any sense. In an instant, the notification man from the squad appeared in front of them, surprised, and raised his eyes. The dungeon appeared to be completely cleared out. Unhappy Arthur didn't know how to amuse himself anymore. There were a lot of skeletons. If he was a real beginner, it would be difficult. Yet he managed to get to the final form of the dungeon. Now a large crystal of red color was in front of him. Hoping that the shield wouldn't explode from one hit and he'd have some fun at least, Arthur lunged straight at Crystal. But no, His hopes were not destined to come true. The crystal shattered as soon as the boy touched it with his hand. What a shame. He will be chased by other instructors, because they can't just leave him alone, right? We have to hurry and get out of here as soon as possible. Once outside, the guy sighed heavily. Well, this is a low-level dungeon, and everything falls down with a single blow. It would be necessary to use the points earned, and Arthur immediately began to increase his level. And now, you can go to the Desert of Darkness. Already resigned to the fact that no one is chasing him, Arthur wanted to go from here, but suddenly, there were more people in front of him than the guy expected. The woman walking in front of them started yelling for everyone else to listen to the leader of the enemies. She seemed very upset about something. Arthur did not understand anything and began to turn his head in different directions. What else is the leader of the enemies? He is here alone, or someone else here invisible? The woman said in a serious voice that she knew exactly what Arthur was aiming for and hoped there would be no unnecessary pointless battles here. The player even got a little upset. Well, he only wanted to try one round, so whether to let them go or not. In a serious voice, the woman continued and told the villain to let the students go, unless, of course, he wanted to stay here forever. He had asked them to leave him alone and not cling to him. Walking past them, the player sighed heavily. Now the main goal was to go to the Desert of Darkness. They fight them. The others sighed heavily. One of the instructors said that thanks to the mistress, they had avoided casualties. The woman only smiled. Judging by the level of defense, this type of seams will be aided by some powers. The woman continued to explore the dungeon. Before that, she was telling everyone to stay out of unnecessary fights, as they need to protect the students, need to be persuaded. The instructors continued to talk worriedly. They didn't even know that Arthur basically didn't care about them. Madame suggested that judging from the dark aura flying around this person, he is definitely full Hao, so he should be very careful with him. One of these players was Rufendal. He destroyed everyone indiscriminately. This guy was completely insane for him. No principles existed at all. But now he was concerned that someone was following him. A lot of commentators were talking about it, so you should be careful. Before he could be bothered, he decided to find this bird himself. Assassin had already prepared to attack. Meanwhile, Arthur had already returned to the Heavenly Devil Village, where he was immediately surrounded by an elder. This time, he said to go to a place where monsters pile up in appreciable numbers are their elders with an extensive type of magic. Luxo and Eddar fell silent and twitched in surprise, seeming to know something. Arthur looked to the side and saw an elderly woman with a creaky voice. She said she had this ability. The woman's mouth stretched into a snide smile, her voice penetrating to the very soul of her soul. And then she would be Arthur's companion. Speaking of which, his little sister Seiya's birthday is coming up soon, so he should prepare a nice present. Soon they were nearing the desert. The place was depressing to say the least, but there were enough people here. Night were snooping around everywhere and preparing for another sweep. Everything looked pretty normal. In 10 minutes, the monster was to appear. About this said notification, Arthur immediately became upset at how long he would have to wait. He turned to his companion and asked if she was ready. Zeta smiled readily. She is always ready. It was a grandmother with the face of a real madman. She smiled and said she would destroy anyone who got in her way. After that attitude, even Arthur felt a little uneasy. It seemed that this old lady needed to be a little more careful. The other players were watching Arthur in horror and seemed to be getting ready to attack him. Everyone wanted to be a hero. Several people were already licking their eyes at the chaos site and preparing to receive the title of hero. Arthur's appearance rallied the players. They wanted to band together and finally capture him. Then everyone would have a chance to get glory. We need to destroy all the monsters and capture the blue stone. The guy turned to the assistant saying he took her because Zeta is good at extensive magic. The old woman immediately took the hint. Her eyes lit up with rage. She would not keep her lord waiting. Raising her hands to the sky, the sorceress began to call upon the higher powers. The clouds immediately became violet in color, and the air was covered with electricity. A few seconds later, a huge giant fell to the ground. He was so horrible that just looking at him sent shivers down my spine. And then they started destroying everything around them that came into their eyes. The giant destroyed dozens of people at once, with one blow. Arthur's sin was intensifying by the second, and the guy could see it perfectly well. His fame spread across the continent, and an aura began to form around him, which was even darker. This happens when the player raises the bad glory to a certain level. Also with this mark, he will be less resistant to divine skills. Arthur even began to wonder a little if it was normal for him to grow up like this. The notice was too much. The guy decided he'd put it off until he had to clean up the place. Soon it was over. Not a single person who wanted to hinder them was left. Only their ghosts everywhere. Looking closer, Arthur saw something in the distance. There was a whole army. There was only who it was, unclear. Looking closer, the player saw that they were huge bulls with crazy faces and very large horns. Zeta didn't have to beg for long. The old woman had already prepared her spell. She was ready to incinerate anyone in her way. A smile appeared on Arthur's face. Everything was going as well as it could. With this granny, everything would go as it should. Arthur rushed forward, and the sorceress was already preparing her most powerful spell to incinerate everyone. As the player approached his opponents, he begged them not to fall back from a single blow, which was no longer fun at all, and he wanted to have some fun. But no. And this time, the bulls fell with a single blow as soon as Arthur touched him with his fist. Well, at least this old lady should get something. Besides, the player has already accumulated marks, so it's better than nothing. They continued to slay monsters by the dozens, the bulls flying around like toys, though they didn't get smaller. Two guys hiding in the bushes under a blanket watched what was going on. They had never seen anything like this before and had goosebumps running down their backs. That old lady with the sword is not really important. But that guy must be a melee mage. That's interesting. The man looked closely. Judging by the damage, this stranger clearly specializes in attacking Arthur, struck blow after blow. But when they tried sorcery, people couldn't even move. It was at least level 50. Meanwhile, the old woman leaped high into the sky and prepared her most powerful attack. She was ready to praise the Overlord forever. It was an all-encompassing strike. Her sword glowed from the overabundance of dark energy. The sight was eerie, to say the least. Even Arthur couldn't help but marvel at the professionalism of this woman. She could barely stand on her feet. He asked her, while recharging her skills to collect the rest of the stones. The old woman happily agreed. It was a speed that normal players wouldn't even dream of. Soon Arthur had bags of gems in his hands, and Zeta was standing happily by his side. And now it's time to get out of here. The boss monster is approaching. Even the earth trembles under his huge feet. The guys sitting in the shelter also tensed up. It was clearly the Bull King, and they had to get out of here quickly. And then he appeared, a huge bull, as tall as a skyscraper, surrounded by his servants, his eyes burning red. Even Arthur had seen something like this. For the first time, he ordered his assistant to mop up the small ones and take the magic stones while he dealt with the main man. The guy's soul was filled with hope. Since this monster is so huge, he shouldn't fall down after a single blow. But the old woman turned to him with obvious concern. Arthur asked, "What's the matter? Is there something wrong now, too?" As they approached, Lord Zeta said that someone huge was approaching. Arthur rolled his eyes. Well, he's going to fight them. Turning his head to the side, he saw some more riders approaching them. No wonder they were bound to show up sooner or later. Arthur was weak now, but one day, he would grow to a level where he would regain the honor of the heavenly devil. The old woman also cheered up. Sitting in his office, Han was completely immersed in the game and paid no attention to anything. Now, he was definitely convinced, no matter how much the guy looked, he didn't see anything like this or anything like the monster patch. The player sighed heavily and thought that if this monster could withstand his blow, then he would get something valuable. But suddenly, he saw a message. Someone went to a dungeon today, but the difficulty was insanely high, so I had to run away. Suddenly, a black giant bear appeared there. Although this place was the abode of an ordinary giant. This was a critical change. Arthur was speechless when he heard that. Was it really all because of him, since he had only been there today? Yes, and besides on the forum apparently discussed it himself, Player 10's speech was about the desert. And when he heard how many blue stones fell from the black bull of the giant, the boy was speechless so much he missed everything. He began to roll on the bed. With impotent anger, he had missed out on so much money and could have made a fortune. That's damn luck. Even with what he has now, he'll only have 15 million to spend, so he won't be able to give a proper gift. Honestly, with that balance, he'll never buy something like a house or a car. Since he's low on actuals right now, a lot of areas remain closed. Yes, and on top of that, he's got a bunch of fines. In that case, Arthur's only option was to raise his level until he reached the kappa. The guy put his fist forward with full readiness. Meanwhile, in the office, a man in a dress suit was finishing his report, which included that very black bull. The characteristics of this monster increased greatly. For unknown reasons, there was clear worry on the man's face. Alliance Director Jong Wook-hyun listened to the report and said that they have a lot of regular players who can be easily replaced. The ward bowed and said it would be done, but there was something else. The headmaster looked at him with a stern look. Whoever had destroyed the Black Bull had caused a lot of damage to their alliance needed to understand who it was in the first place. It had been 3 weeks since Arthur had decided to level up, and now his character was level 29. Luxo appeared out of nowhere. He said he was worried about making sure that the jade body of the Overlord would not be harmed in any way, but Arthur was calm. The man wanted to revive something else. He'd seen Arthur torture himself with training. In an enthusiastic voice, the player said that despite all the restrictions, he can't show his weak side because he wants to conquer the world. After such speeches, Luxo was even more firmly rooted in his belief of his lord. He dared not say anything more. The follower immediately slammed his head into the floor in a furious bow and said he would serve his master until he let out his last breath. Meanwhile, Arthur was over the moon, all for the sake of achieving his goal of a future car and apartment. He was already dreaming of his riches. Suddenly, he was distracted by a notification. He got a text and hoped it was from his little sister. It was really Saya. She said she had already gotten her quest and wondered if her brother had gotten his. To be honest, Arthur had no idea what this quest was. The first time he had heard of it, the guy was trying to figure out what it was all about. Being in the real world, they started to learn all the details. People on the forums turned out to be overly aggressive, and there was no way to learn anything from there. It is still unknown what these hidden classes are, but if it is a hidden class related to the main story, then it surely has immense power. Saya asked if her brother would participate in this quest, replied that he is full how after all. It is unlikely that he will be given such an opportunity is sister going to. The girl blushed and said that she's been busy lately, but she'll find a moment and the rankers or players from overseas will definitely challenge them. Somehow, the difficulty has increased, and the quest involves Arthur himself as the ultimate evil, and that's bad. The guy began to slowly boil with rage, and he was going to live happily enjoying the benefits of the bourgeoisie, and at this rate, will soon go crazy. As soon as the elders heard that the master would go alone on the next quest, they were horrified at how this was even possible. They began to dissuade their lord. It was too dangerous even for him. How could he risk his life like that? The fact is, Arthur is not aware of their allegiance. However, according to an informant, the movement of these elders is now known in the empire of her face. So, it's time to be careful not to make any sudden moves. Arthur was completely serious and didn't take no for an answer. Realizing that all this concern was for their safety, the elders almost cried. After all, the Lord loves them. The boy turned around and headed towards the quest and ordered to guard the village. The elders waved to him. After solving the food problem, one would have to worry about improving the habitat, but the costs were so great that nothing has worked so far. In the end, all that's left is to plow hard for levels, and you have to get to the top somehow, and only then can Arthur continue the quest with the map. You need to try your best to raise your level, to ensure your future only gets to destroy monsters. All Arthur had to do to destroy the next monster was touch it. And there was something else, by the way. He beat up the other monsters and relieved the stress, or he'll go crazy at this rate. At some point, a sign appeared in front of him. He had gained a new skill, an unusually powerful fist. It would come in handy while hunting. Seeing that this skill reduces attack power just what he needed, Arthur cried with happiness. Finally, the gods heard him. He'll be able to get artifacts until he's finished with the last blow, so the guy would still be happy if someone hadn't approached him from behind. Finished rejoicing, Arthur tensed up from behind, heard someone's unfamiliar voice, who it was anyway, what he was here for. Rufendal came up behind him and said in an irritated voice that he was in really big trouble because of this kid. He's constantly suspected of things he didn't do. The assassin was furious. The guy's eyes were red with rage, and he was fed up with these union players, and it was all because of this stranger. Arthur looked closely, but still didn't understand who it was. A thick aura, yes, and the outfit was appropriate. After this, Rufendal has lost faith in himself. He has no conscience at all, or he's joking. If so, it's not funny at all. But Arthur just scratched the back of his head and said he really didn't know the funny man for picking on him. Rufendal was beginning to laugh hysterically at the absurdity of it all. The hunter introduced himself and said that he was the Rufendal that Arthur so unceremoniously claimed to be, and the boy was furious. He had come here to catch and hand Arthur over to the Alliance. Now did he realize or not, Arthur just looked at him and blinked. Meanwhile, Rufendal continued to rampage. The time was right to fall to his knees and beg for mercy. One must properly pay for the use of his name. The hunter continued to rant, but Arthur still didn't understand what this strange fellow wanted. But hearing that the stranger wants to fight him, the player cheered up. Finally, something interesting. After that, the hunter couldn't control himself anymore. This insolent man doesn't even understand good words. But now, it's time for him to show who's boss. Without waiting for an answer, Rufendal threw an energy wave at Arthur, even slightly surprised by the player's attack. But no, the damage was so great that Arthur didn't even feel it. Even though it was Rufendal's main trick, it was funny. Well, if he wants to play for real, then so be it. Arthur has already prepared his fists to end this masquerade in one blow. After that, even the hunter was a little scared when he saw the power of his opponent. He believed that he could destroy the squad leader with a single blow. But he didn't have time to finish his thoughts, for Arthur had already come close to him in one leap. At the last moment, Rufendal managed to dodge and went into the astral for another second. The hunter even started to get a little nervous, though he didn't show it. For the first time in his life, he was facing a truly powerful opponent. Arthur was even a little disappointed. He hit a normal shot and missed. Maybe he should have hit a little harder. A frantic smile appeared on Rufendal's face as he began to get annoyed with his opponent's constant chatter during the fight. Should have hit him. While the player was defenseless and the hunter immediately rushed to attack Arthur, just stood his ground and waited. But not a second later, Arthur's fist came out and hit Rufendal in the face, and he flew away before he realized what had happened. He had to activate almost all of his abilities to at least stay on his feet, and the hunter was furious at the insolence. It turns out the first blow was a decoy, and the second was just in full force. Arthur was already preparing to strike the next. The bouncing of that Rufendal was pissing him off so much, it was completely impossible to concentrate. It would be easier if Arthur could use at least one skill. But it was too late to ponder. The hunter was truly angry and summoned some undead wanting to end this. Arthur was completely calm. Well, if the opponent wants to play to his strengths, Arthur also has a trump card up his sleeve. They rushed to meet each other a few more centimeters, and then it's over. But not even a second after Rufendal was on the other side of the world, Arthur was even a little upset he had actually passed out after one hit. The player scratched his head. Maybe his opponent is just pretending. Did the earlier attack destroy all the defense spells? But it's not funny. Arthur thought his opponent would be strong, but Rufendal was furious. He had heard all this bullying, and it hurt him to the core. He had, after all, been considered the strongest hunter until then. But when the hunter heard that the enemy had destroyed all his items, it was the final blow. He was ready to pass out a second time. And now, for the second time, Arthur has failed, of course. If all the items are destroyed, nothing will fall out. Okay, now he was pumped up enough to go to the next location. The guy pushed off and flew high up. Left near his body, Rufendal was furious. He vowed to find this boy by all means. But no sooner had the guy finished getting angry than he felt that he was enveloped by some kind of aura, and his body felt as if it was shackled with chains. From somewhere appeared an incomprehensible ghostly figure, shrouded in the same aura of anger. The stranger was wearing a cloak. Fear filled the unfortunate guy's mind. He could already feel the ghostly hands reaching for his neck from where this man had come from in the first place. The stranger held out her hand to him and said dreamily, "It would be nice to get his rival, but that's okay this time." Rufendal felt his consciousness leave his head with horror, as if he were in serious trouble. Suddenly, the guy felt like he was back to life again. He felt his body, but something was still wrong. The strange, hooded stranger ordered him now to do 10 push-ups. The hunter became furious at such insolence. But no sooner had he voiced his displeasure than an electric shock ran through his entire body. There was nothing to do. I had to do push-ups, and the insolent stranger only laughed, standing nearby. Continuing to push off Rufendal was furious soul slavery. He had never even heard of such a skill. What the heck is this? From the looks of it, he has someone in front of him. The young hunter continued to look for options. If you rub in trust well, you can get him comfortable with you. Rufendal bowed to the ground and said that the master wanted the body of the boy he fought with, didn't he? In his mind, a brilliant idea arose. The lad put his hand to his heart and said he would help the new master in the matter. Meanwhile, while in the real world, Arthur and his sister decide to go to McDonald's and buy as many hamburgers as their sister wants. It seems that nothing else brought her so much pleasure when she saw the hamburgers. Saya blossomed with happiness. She didn't need anything else. After sitting down at the table, the girl began to eat her treats with gusto, and Arthur sat opposite and just watched with amusement. Although he has to make a lot of efforts to improve the village of the Heavenly Devil, but now it is nothing for him to buy a hamburger for his sister. Seiya continued to eat, asked why her brother began to show her such care. After all, before this was not Arthur, even a little stammered. Making a serious look on his face, the guy told his sister to take it seriously, and it's not even about hamburgers. Now, Arthur's luck is at the lowest level possible with monsters, but even when he destroys them, nothing falls out. The girl continued eating, and didn't seem to be listening to her brother at all, but Arthur spoke quite seriously. But when Seiya heard that her brother wanted to start a company with her, she spit out all the coke she could get from the surprise. For a second, she even thought her brother was crazy, but Arthur assured her that it wasn't that simple. It wouldn't be a firm like in the normal world. Sister got a little sad and said that in their time, the market had gotten too spoiled with the appearance of black monsters. Yes, and besides, she would soon be given a promotion. But Arthur was still completely serious. He said he had thought it over, and his decision was not spontaneous. Sighing heavily, Seiya relented and asked, what is her brother going to do in that case? Realizing that he had captured his sister's attention, Arthur continued, now let her listen with both ears, for the conversation was serious. Meanwhile, the conference room of the Alliance was having another meeting, and people were talking amongst themselves. The director was standing at the head and talking. He was talking about that chaos player who doesn't touch anyone until you approach him. The Alliance president said, that's why they send out advisories everywhere. If they meet a player like that, don't touch him. The director said that the Chaosite doesn't seem to be the Rufendal they thought he was in the beginning, but someone else, an unknown player who hasn't appeared before. The headmaster turned on the projector and showed a video of Arthur fighting Rufendal. The owner of the company was impressed that he was able to get this video now that it cleared up a lot and at least they know who attacked them. Looks like Rufendal also made the wrong choice. Even though his defense magic was destroyed, he rushed back into the attack very lightly. The director suggested that this player had obtained a hidden class, but how remained a mystery. But they managed to get a quest, while searching for information in this quest, to level up one of the noble NPCs. The founder immediately inquired what was the nature of this assignment. The director replied that they had to catch Remtadian. At present, the nobles think of this person as Full How. The director showed an image of the suspect. This is an ordinary middle-aged man. This is an ordinary middle-aged man. The chief expressed doubts whether this man was not very different from the one in the portrait. Everything was right. But there was one thing, but they had to analyze it. In the end, it turned out that the system considers this player to be Remtadian, and there can be no mistake. The main served in front of him hands now, as long as they get promotion points. Everything else doesn't matter, so how much he needs. The director said no more than 30 people. He offered to pay 100,000 consolation money and 3 million to those who contributed the most to the raid. Another member of the meeting hesitated. It seems it won't quite be enough with so much at stake. But the director, they have the necessary growth points. All members of their union are a dedicated company and will work tirelessly. So there is no need to worry about that. The boss was also sure that this amount would be enough for the incentive, so no need to worry, and it's time to get down to business. For Remtadian's head, there is a great bounty of 700 millions, and the rest of the bounty will be divided amongst themselves, a decision that was agreeable to all. The founder, meanwhile, was happy everything was going according to plan. The main thing was that the money went into his pocket and nothing else mattered. Now, in the virtual world, Arthur met his sister and immediately asked if she had found everything he had asked for. The girl was carrying a huge stack of books in her hands. She had found everything, but I was sure that my brother would really have enough. It's all beginner's magic. It's much less effective than what a masterclass can use. Seiya was extremely puzzled. Even so, her brother would have no time to study during the class change. The girl was very worried. While reading one of the books, Arthur quoted a proverb that even a weed can become a sword if you become a master swordsman. But his sister had heard nothing of the sort. He immediately started learning different skills started flying books, and new abilities appeared time after time. Hearing that her brother had not yet changed class, Seiya was horrified. Did this really be true? Arthur still didn't understand what the big deal was. But the girl continued to rebel. Where has it even seen a person with such skills still has not chosen a class? This is really crazy. In a calm voice, Arthur said he understood all of this and was grateful for the help. But don't get so worked up. Seiya only gave him a reproachful look. But on Arthur's face was complete confidence in his abilities. so they will move together and grow together. So no need to worry. The girl still had doubts about whether it would be so effective. Arthur suggested that she try it first. With the stats he had, it should work anyway. He had already put his hands forward and cast the spell. The basic treatment worked perfectly, and my sister felt her whole body start to power up. Still not understanding anything, she was about to drink the healing potion, but Arthur invited her to look at her streak of life. As soon as Seiya looked up, she bulged her eyes. From surprise, her life bar was full. It definitely wasn't a glitch, or she was imagining it. That should have been enough, and Arthur decided to give her a boost. Now she could fight with even more power. But the girl still didn't understand who she was fighting. "Do you really need to catch a skeleton?" Arthur pointed his finger in the direction and said that the target was already there. The uncomprehending sister turned around to see who could be there and heard someone growling from behind. In front of them stood a huge giant bear. For a second, silence reigned, and the girl thought it was still some kind of a joke. But no, the bear was completely real. He opened his wide maw and roared with rage. Out of fear, Seiya started to stutter. Does her brother want her to take down that bear alone? Usually, since she does it in a group. But contrary to all fears, 3 minutes later, the bear was destroyed. Seiya didn't even notice how she did it. The girl even fell to her knees. Now she was beginning to believe her brother's words. The evidence was more than enough. She also took out a blue stone, so she earned 5 million on her own, and she began to boil with delight. But unfortunately, if she gave it to the Union, she'd get 100 million. But now she has to make do with what she has because they're single. With confidence in his voice, Arthur said that he was going to raise his level to 45th in the desert, and invited Sister Seiya, naturally agreed. In the wilderness of darkness, the long road to level up began. Arthur was leading a whole herd of bulls. Her sister was already ready and was casting her spell, magical words bursting out of her mouth, and her wand began to burn from the excess energy. Finally, she aimed her weapon, and Arthur barely had time to move aside to avoid being burned by the lightning. The whole herd of bulls was already lying on the ground without breathing perfectly. Bluestone fell out. Seiya jumped with happiness. She was already imagining how much money she would make. They now had as many as 18 blue stones, for that can get a whole lot of money. Her sister was jumping with happiness. Now she could open her own burger restaurant and eat as much as she wanted, but Arthur was looking somewhere else. Suddenly, he noticed a man forming behind him who was already preparing his sword strike. Still, someone remained quickly reacting. The player repelled the attack with a single fist strike, and the attacker flew aside. His sister picked up his initiative and struck the opponent with the lightning Arthur had ordered to pick up the items, if any. Sure. The girl complied with the request, but she still felt like it was some kind of robbery. She couldn't stand the thought that they were criminals. Arthur looked around and said that the others considered him a low-level chaosite, so he should attack those who attack first. By the way, a whole army of knights was already approaching them, with the commander walking in front and an army of knights behind him. It looked threatening. A horrified Seiya said it was a whole raid coming for them. So what are they worth? Arthur was completely calm. It's a bit late to run away with an army in front of them, but we'll have to deal with them. And to top it off, a message popped up saying that they couldn't leave the area until PvP was over. Seiya almost fainted now that they were dead for sure. Well, Arthur hurriedly calmed her down by telling her to step aside so it didn't look like she was on the same team. A dark aura formed around the guy again, he said with a chuckle, that if they didn't attack him first, and he wouldn't destroy them. But the squad leader seemed to be adamant upon recognizing that the man in front of them was the target. He ordered everyone to attack immediately. It was Director Jin. He ordered everyone to keep their distance and remember to strategize. The first to act were the mages, who threw the phantom chains on Arthur. The boy only sighed heavily. Why doesn't anyone understand what he's saying? He's clearly saying that if you don't attack him, he won't hurt anyone. It only took a flick of his hand for the chains to fall apart. They didn't restrain his movements at all. Next was a fireball. Without any difficulty, Arthur launched it straight into the pile of knights. Jin was very surprised. Is this normal magic? Or does it seem to him? How is this guy even going to resist? The commander ordered the tanks to put up their shields, and the huge knights moved forward, blocking all space with their shields. The man shouted that this man's basic magic was at a low level, so there was nothing to fear but to block. But Arthur just watched what was happening and didn't even know what to say, as he was fed up with all these attackers. After the explosion, the dust began to settle. The commander did not even immediately realize what had happened. He coughed and looked around. All his subordinates were sent to the other side with just one basic spell, but Arthur stood unharmed. There was an incredibly powerful aura emanating from the player, but the commander still couldn't understand why this was the case. Is he my melee master? Jin ordered everyone to remain calm, but the tremor in the voice clearly gave away his excitement and fear. He was still standing there, trying to think logically about whether he should even run away from here, but Arthur was looking at them and smiling. Smiling in a calm voice, Arthur said they were dead anyway, if his magic even touched them. The sister standing next to him said in a frightened voice that it was the first time she had ever seen a fireball of that size. Seiya asked in a trembling voice if her brother was being held captive. Arthur hesitated a bit and replied that it wasn't what she thought. When asked why he was standing there, the guy said he was talking to her and the skill recharge wasn't finished yet. When she noticed the mad expression on her brother's face, she realized that she could no longer consider him a reasonable person. Currently, it would take just under a minute for his skills to recharge. Arthur was already starting to get bored. These cooldowns were terribly annoying. The troop leader ordered on command for all ranged attackers to prepare to deliver a crushing blow. But that kid's a mage, not a fighter as it turns out, and it was hard to know what his fighting style was. Alliance President Johnson Dream stood at the head of the troops and watched the whole thing unfold. The general situation heated up. The enemy was stronger than they thought, so they need to mobilize all their forces. The number of attackers clearly need to increase. The troop commander ordered the rangers to attack immediately. The archers drew their arrows and took good aim. The arrows were whistling towards Arthur, but he stood there and did nothing, a smile on his face. But now he would show them. The second charge did not wait long. Soldiers with rifles began to shoot from all barrels, only to destroy the hated creep. After the third volley, there was such a powerful explosion that the earth underfoot began to shake. The air rose a real firestorm. Commander Jin rejoiced. The tactics worked perfectly. This kid doesn't have a single chance of surviving after such an attack. He had something to think about, but he heard his warriors falling one by one as Arthur dealt with them like toys. A terrible guess came to me. This kid hasn't been tied up this whole time. And besides, the reload's over. He used a fireball, and immediately there was a huge explosion, followed by Arthur rushing at the others. Explosions rattled absolutely everywhere, player after all, already tired of repeating if they will attack first your end. Seeing that the situation was very dire, the president approached the commander and told him to leave it to him. Jin was worried. What about the support players? But the president has already contacted his partners. Now catching this player is paramount, so it's worth sharing the quest. Everyone immediately dispatched their forces after learning what their goal was, so the army would only become larger. With a bored face, Arthur continued slaying the warriors by the dozens. Their attack power wasn't even enough to wound him even a little. At this rate, he could not afford any army. After all, so on the face of the guy again stretched a smile to him. Warriors were already approaching him. Seiya standing behind at a slight distance and watched as the battle scene was a real mess. She was beginning to worry about her brother. Suddenly there was his whisper. Arthur asked to hit with a spell. The girl was even a little scared, but there is also her brother. How can she hit? But the player said that in that case, the girl herself would fall under suspicion somehow. Strange that she stands by all this time and does nothing. How about a lightning strike? Seiya frowned. She liked that idea less and less. But Arthur somehow didn't care, and he said let his sister do what she thought was right. He wouldn't take the damage anyway. In that case, there was no choice. Seiya took out her wand and concentrated all the power she had into it and struck out with a burst of electricity. During the battle, Arthur has a system notification. He brutally destroys his enemies. He wanted to shout to his sister to wait a little while he checked, but the girl could no longer hear the lightning coming towards him. A second later, the guy felt like an electric shock went through his whole body, and this girl is still called his little sister. Seiya kept hitting spells, and at the last moment, saw that she had gotten her own professional quest. Soon, the notoriety about Arthur grew so much that he was given the title of Celestial Star of Destruction. Arthur smiled as he looked at his stats, but he was getting closer to what was called absolute evil with every passing second. In the meantime, the fighters could not understand who was in front of them. Whether it was a martial artist or a sorcerer, he fought in a completely incomprehensible manner. Turning to his opponents, Arthur said with a smile that he had no class at all. So let him not be tormented by speculation. And the leaders stood at the top and watched their army disappear at breakneck speed. It was a headache. The president was furious when he heard that their opponent had no class, but it couldn't be because he had thought that the kid was of a hidden class all along. He was sure that their opponent was also a hidden class like a warlord child and had a weakness. The president told his colleague that they were advancing and moved forward with sword in hand. Director Jin also prepared himself. Arthur continued to destroy his opponents one by one and paid no attention to the screams of his enemies. Soon it was all over. Though, if you think about it logically, the lack of ranged skills could be considered a weakness. Arthur reached out. "Where did you come from?" His sister showed up and asked for Arthur to do some experiments with her. The player was a little surprised. With obvious concern on her face, Seiya said that she had gotten a professional quest, and Arthur wondered a little, why would that be? Soon, they came to another place. Sister said she would hit full force. Arthur reassured her, saying he had used everything he could. Soon, he was struck by a powerful lightning strike that would have turned anyone else to ash in seconds. But Arthur felt only a slight tingling sensation that was even somewhat pleasant, like a light massage. His sister used every spell she had, but Arthur stood still and felt almost nothing. The girl tried so hard that her mind went blank. She did everything in her power. She used everything in her arsenal. Eventually, she spent all her strength. Of course, Arthur's health bar decreased significantly, but still, he remained standing in his place. Seiya looked at her brother in surprise. Did he really have such a title? The girl couldn't believe what she was seeing. But Arthur didn't seem surprised that it had anything to do with the assignment. He asked his sister to wait while he dealt with the monsters and left. The girl didn't even have time to say anything before she was alone in just a second. Watching my brother Seiya saw a message that he was in a panic and trying to escape. But what scared him so much, could it be that she found out everything? But from afar, it didn't look like the brother was panicking or trying to escape. Something was definitely wrong here. She motioned for her brother to get as far away from her as possible. Arthur stopped and looked at her with a surprised look at what else she was up to. Waving his hand, the player said it was going forward, and if anything happens, let Sister call Seiya showed the OK sign with her fingers. Notices soon appeared before her. She fully satisfied the conditions of passing the class quest. Arthur also got a notification about the main scenario. Everything was updated. The guy even stopped a little. As soon as the girl saw that she now sits on the holy throne, she could not believe her eyes. Is it really possible? In the real world, there was a meeting going on in a conference room with a man standing at the podium checking the microphone. It was the president who sadly began his report. I didn't want to talk about it, but the alliance was facing difficulties. The quest to capture the target failed due to misinformation. They were dealt a devastating blow. In response to this loss, had to be urgently downsized. The economy was in decline because of this player. People began to talk anxiously. The situation was heating up by the second. On the face of one of the employees, it's exactly as he thought it would be. Nothing to be surprised about. The president bowed, and with regret in his heart, said that they have to continue this quest. Once they finish, everyone can get promoted. Then his expression changed, and the man said that once the situation cleared up, he hoped to see everyone in better circumstances. Following this, the man headed to the room with the virtual machine and was already lying in the capsule. The most important part was the restoration of the relationship with his partners. The president was thinking the main thing was that the alliance should survive, but only if you pour in the secret funds to eliminate Haosit for about $1 billion. Moving to the virtual world, the director was approaching the player's tavern. He had the connections to order the destruction. At the entrance, he was greeted by a friendly bartender wiping his glass. It had certainly been a long time since such visitors had been here. The man inquired as to what business they had come for today, and a roll of paper immediately appeared in front of his nose. The visitor said in a quiet voice that he had an order with the Sarmak group for destruction. The bartender carefully reread the order rather troublesomely, how much money he had. The man looked at the customer spitefully. The visitor said that 1 billion won was ready for prepayment and threw a bag of gold on the table. Turning his back, the bartender replied that in 3 days, everything would be ready. The man clutched the order sheet in his hands. The president rejoiced. He hired the best of the best. The damn villain has no idea what kind of manhunt is about to begin. It hurt, of course, to spend such money on him on no choice. The old man left the tavern and headed for the exit of the fortress. He continued to speculate on how to finally destroy the hated enemy, but suddenly his head was knocked off his shoulders in one powerful blow. He didn't even notice what happened, and his soul was already in the astral world, didn't understand anything, and just blinked his eyes. He noticed a dark figure shrouded in an ominous aura and immediately looked in his direction. How did this even happen? In front of him stood a man whose face was hidden by a red mask and whose entire body was covered by a dark cloak. The old man saw a card fall out of the stranger's hands. It was a card of black colors, but how is this possible? Throwing the map on the floor, the stranger said that this was just the beginning, but the old man was given an indefinite sentence. The man went cold with fear. At this moment at the base, the Sarmak assassin was reporting as ordered. The order was placed by the Black Flower faction. The subordinate still wondered why the head didn't assign such a job to his subordinates. After all, they could have easily done it. Immediately, a black figure appeared near him, literally out of nowhere. The man went cold with fear. The ringleader flew by and said he was going to fulfill the request himself. Let him mean it, the subordinate replied in a trembling voice that he understood. Assassin pulled out a curved blade. Finally, this moment had finally arrived. It had been over 3 decades since he had created the faction in the name of the Absolute. A man in a black cloak came out of the tent. It was the Sarmak group leader Johann. Finally, the cause of his life began to move. Many kilometers away, Arthur was shocked his sister had already reached level 30. It was simply unthinkable. How could it be so fast? The girl had been rejoicing since she had changed class. So much experience had poured in it. Is after all wonderful. The joy had no bounds. Continuing to wonder, Arthur said, "But she doesn't have her enhancement goggles. Seiya said that she doesn't even need them. She's a pure white mage. Now she has a lot of trump cards up her sleeve." But it was only because of her brother that a smile spread across the girl's face. At this point, the guy realized she had been changed class. Only because she was hunting him comes out, Arthur is totally and utterly evil after all. He, of course, had one simple goal: to eat well and live peacefully, but then his sister could easily reach the maximum level. Because they were involved in a battle in the desert, the guys have to whisper in order not to be noticed, and Seiya was already a platinum hero. Scratching the back of his head, Arthur hesitated and asked not to be destroyed. Even an occasional goosebumps ran down his back. But in her sister's eyes appeared excitement. She wanted to destroy evil if she got so much experience for just hitting what will be the next reward. After all, this girl loved money more than anything else in the world. She begged to destroy her brother. For once, Arthur began to be afraid of this girl. Is she really that immoral? Arthur couldn't even believe his sister was such a monster. But the girl winked at him and said it was just a game. Then they would just split the reward, as agreed. With sadness in his heart, Arthur raised one finger and said that if he wanted to go to the other side of the world, it would be by her hand. This cheered his sister up, but Arthur wondered how his youngest could talk so enthusiastically about such things. They went to clean up the next dungeon on the other side. As soon as Seiya got the Holy Throne, it became more fun. That's not a bad thing. The next dungeon was cleared in a few minutes. The guys collected all the loot. There were quite valuable items, if you look at it that way. After opening the characteristics window, Arthur realized that sooner or later, he had to level up whether he wanted to or not. He was pulled out of his thoughts by his sister's voice, who said she would replenish her potions and then come back. Arthur told her not to get into trouble. Basically, let her just pick up whatever falls out. The girl nodded her head and ran deeper into the cave. While his sister is searching for supplies, Arthur decides to destroy a few more monsters to level up finally. But he was not destined to do it, since behind his back literally grew a stranger, presented legs to his throat. It was Johann. He said in a growling voice that the Absolute should follow him. If he didn't, he would go to the other world. They stood like that for a few more seconds and talked in whispers. Johann said that his guild would absolutely pass judgment. In addition, a task icon appeared in front of Arthur. As soon as this stranger appeared in front of him, he had to avoid him and earn respect. This was truly an unheard of situation. Arthur thought about all the quests he had had of the highest rank. This was the first time this had happened to him. A lot of weirdness. After striking one blow to him, his sister got the Holy See means it's highly likely he could become totally evil. If the All Saints seated thrones do not need to be promoted with superior abilities, they will grow at a tremendous rate. At worst, if he has to deal with the Saints alone, he'll balance getting 300 level quests. Arthur continued to stand motionless. He seemed to realize who was after him. Standing behind Johann, ordered the weapons to be lowered. If such a thing is available, Arthur stood and did nothing. Such a demand shocked the boy, and why should he even reveal his qualifications? Yes, and besides, the assassin knows perfectly well that there are no weapons. Johann didn't understand, or pretended not to, and squinted at his victim. Great, Arthur breathed a sigh of relief. If this guy just wanted to destroy him, he wouldn't waste time talking. He began to tell me that he was under a special restriction, of course. Now he looked very weak. That's why it takes so long to remove restrictions. So don't let Johann be surprised. Of course, they had waited a long time for his appearance, so if they wait a little longer, everything will be clearer. Johann continued to listen, spreading his hands apart. Arthur continued to explain, and why they don't miss an opportunity to trample the barely swollen seeds. Approaching him, Arthur asked if Johann was sure that because of his mistake now, he would not regret it in the future. As Assassin looked closer, he saw that behind the man's back, there was a terrifying, powerful aura, so powerful, it sent shivers down his spine. Johann came to be horrified. Is this mind technique conquering the heavens? He really isn't kidding now, or is this a glitch? Meanwhile, Arthur continued to speak. Naturally, he can only meet all the demands if he is given some time. Johann said that soon he would see everything with his own eyes, and then the truth would be revealed. Throwing on his cloak, Assassin said he would give him 10 minutes, and in the meantime, he would shadow him and watch his every move. With a heavy sigh, the player rejoiced. Thank God he was able to win. At least a little time is already better. Enough experience has already been accumulated. So you just need to go out and defeat a couple of monsters. Don't care about the time, it will handle much faster. When he left the dungeon, Arthur looked around, but there were no monsters around. The guy started frantically swiveling his head around, looking for someone to destroy and prove his strength. Usually he'd come across bears or skeletons or some other monsters at every turn, but here there was absolutely nothing. And all because of his luck, which had fallen below 0 by 100, poor Arthur ran in search of someone. Besides, time was running at a disastrously short half a minute before the deadline. From what Johann had told him, Arthur doubted that the guy would give him at least another minute. He also got a message from his sister saying she'd finally found her brother, but Arthur begged her to stay away. But the girl did not listen to him. She was already rushing towards him from all directions, and dozens of bears were running after her. Arthur only had to watch her with a surprised look, so that's where all the monsters had gone. Well, that's even better. It was only now that he realized how lucky he was that Arthur had already prepared the powerful spell. His little sister had done him an invaluable favor. Seiya continued to take offense. Now she didn't understand anything at all. Then why did brother say to stay away? But before the girl could think of anything else, a real bullet whizzed past her, her brother moving at an incredible speed. As he walked, he shouted that it would take a long time to explain. Let his sister get out of here as soon as possible. Later, he'll make it up to her. And now it was necessary to destroy these bears at all costs. Arthur was raising his level one by one. He had already lost count. There was only a little time left to test the skill because the guy had already reached the right level and immediately poked at the skill. He begged for the system to just not slow down behind his back. Johann had already appeared preparing to strike. Arthur finally managed to get the right skill, and a pillar of energy fell on his body. Johann managed to bounce back at the last moment. The only thing left to breathe a sigh of relief is that the player was one step away from failure. But thank God everything went right at the last moment. Now even Johann wouldn't be able to say anything to him as the notice suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Arthur raised an eyebrow in surprise. Something very much changed all around there with such a powerful energy that even Arthur could hardly stand on his feet. He finally got the title of absolutely evil. Johann barely bounced to the side and couldn't believe his eyes. Could he really see it? Meanwhile, Arthur was enjoying his new look. Of course, the guy felt a little strange, but he had now achieved what he wanted. It was wonderful. When Arthur decided to check his new characteristics, he was very surprised that all his skills had increased so much that he couldn't believe it himself. Now, only the player noticed Johann kneeling in front of him and greeting the Overlord. Assassin apologized for not immediately recognizing the true Lord and for doubting his power. With a good-natured smile, Arthur held out his hand and said it was all right. If he were Johann, he would have done the same. The guy tried to act friendly and thankful that his skills were recognized, but inside, he was jubilant that Sarmak now belonged to him. Kneeling before him, Johann introduced himself and swore allegiance to his new master. Excellent. Now there's only one elder left. Arthur wanted to say something else, but then he was distracted by the sound of messages from his sister, who was trying hard to get his attention. Seiya said that she had just learned that the ultimate evil had appeared, and now there was chaos in the communities. She had no idea that the ultimate evil was her own brother, but she shouldn't have said so before. Arthur decided to make an excuse and said that he just did a good job with his fists here, that's all, so there was nothing to worry about. Seeing how much Arthur's stats had increased, Seiya decided to quit the game because her heart was about to jump out of her chest, as if that was even possible. The girl disconnected from Olympus, but for some time she continued to sit inside the capsule, not believing her eyes. Yeah, sure, her brother's a little out of the norm, but that's a little over the top. Whatever, she's got an appointment, so we should start packing. Still inside the game, Arthur thought that his sister seemed very shocked, and now how to tell her. Either way, now it was more important to see what reward he received for passing such a high-ranking quest. He ordered Johann to continue. The assassin bowed and said he had something to say to his new lord first. Arthur was even a little surprised. He had already understood everything perfectly well. But Johann did have something to say. He wanted to report on the current power and status of the guild. It seems uninvited guests have arrived. Assassin immediately vaporized, and Arthur was ready to fall under the ground. From anger at such an important moment, they were interrupted. In front of them was a rider, and behind him a whole army of men, shouting that this man was their main target. Arthur turned his head in their direction. The rider shouted to his subordinates that whoever brought this man's head would receive an unprecedented reward and eternal honor. It was starting to get annoying, Arthur asked. They were at it again. Yes, and why do these guys keep calling him Ramtadian? Without deeming it necessary to explain, the rider ordered all his soldiers to go into battle and swung his long sword. Unfortunately, Arthur didn't understand what they were talking about, so let him be Ramtadian. Soon, the whole regiment of knights was defeated. Arthur was again very upset. He was facing knights for the first time, and it turned out that they were such weaklings. But their commander was more assertive and continued to attack even though he was outnumbered. He wanted to say something else, but Arthur didn't listen to him. He was already rushing towards his opponent at full speed. A second later, the unfortunate man felt a powerful blow to his chest and flew off somewhere very far to the side. To the boy's surprise, his opponent turned out to have pretty good equipment. Since he was able to block his blow, it would be fun. The man struggled to keep up with Arthur's pressure and tried not to show it, but it was noticeable how tense he was. But the player dodged and hit the man in the head with his fist with all his might, knocking him out. After destroying the enemy, Arthur gained a few more points of evil, and yet this technique wasn't bad, a few moves and almost no effort. The boy turned to Johann again and asked him to continue, but he was again distracted by someone's unfamiliar voice. Arthur was furious. Whoever else is trying to stop him should come out now and fight, so there's no question. A figure dressed in a dark cloak emerged from the forest. Could it be another mercenary sent to destroy Arthur? Let him begin. The stranger replied that he was not a hunter, but would be more than happy to destroy Arthur and make him his slave. The stranger held out his hand and ordered Rufendal to move forward, and the kid on all fours stood beside him. Arthur was not a little surprised to see that it was the same guy who had tried to attack him at the beginning of the journey. Rufendal's eyes were frantic, and he could finally get even with this man who had sent him to the other world so easily. When he tried to pronounce the name of an old acquaintance, Arthur made a mistake, which infuriated Rufendal. With joy, the hunter pointed his finger at Arthur. Now he was definitely in trouble, and he was going to the end of the world. Smiling, Rufendal asked his master, "Did he really do a good job?" The necromancer seemed pleased. With a wave of her hand, the girl smiled. Great that they would have all these bodies as a bonus. If Arthur became her slave, that would be fine. As soon as the woman waved her hand, the bodies lying next to Arthur began to move and get up, returning from the other side of the world. Their eyes were swollen with magic. Their mouths were drooling, and they were making some kind of unintelligible sound. Soon, there was an entire army in front of Arthur. The guy sighed heavily. Did he really have a necromancer in front of him? The player wondered, looks like this person had a hidden class. The necromancer stood behind and smiled with joy. Shivering with excitement, the boy thought that perhaps this undead would be too strong. One of the men who had risen from the other world pointed his finger at Arthur and shouted that it was Ramtadian, and it seemed that this man now possessed reason. His eyes widened with rage. The man began to scream. Now Arthur could do nothing to him. People were approaching the player in a whole bunch. Arthur did nothing, just stood there and watched them. In front of him suddenly appeared signs he had met all the requirements for the appearance of the title effect Absolute Evil. He began to powerfully control all the products of dark magic. The undead began to slash Arthur slowly. The necromancer was shocked. Why her servants were not obeying, she was no longer in control of what was happening. Arthur smiled and thought that this skill was similar to the skill of stealing, but he asked whether these people would listen to him or not. Looking at the rest of the soldiers, the guy cringed. They pissed him off, so let go is sent back to hell. Rufendal turned out to be very slippery if this situation. Then he too will go over to the strange guy. The necromancer became furious. Arthur asked Rufendal, "He's undead too, isn't he?" The boy hesitated, his voice trembling with fear. A smile slowly began to appear on Arthur's face. From the outside, it seems that this kid would listen to him too. Rufendal didn't want to listen to anyone. He wanted to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. A second later, a pillar of dark energy descended on the guy, covering his entire body, and the unfortunate man screamed. The necromancer standing behind her didn't understand how it was even possible all her servants stopped listening in a second. Looking at his opponent with a condescending look, Arthur asked how old he was in general. The man in the cloak wanted to name his age, but hesitated he couldn't say, although it was clear from his voice that it wasn't too much. Arthur wondered if the undead were now in his hands. So, what to do about that pesky sorcerer? He only destroys those who attack first. Folding his hands in front of him, the necromancer inquired, now he could go indeed. There was nothing to do. Arthur waved his hand and allowed him to leave. The sorcerer began to bow and thank Rufendal, who was standing next to him, for leaving him alive at all. But the situation was, so now he is under the control of his worst enemy who sent him to the other world. There was nothing left but to rub in the new master and trust. Yet so recently, the evil Rufendal had changed beyond recognition. A sinister smile appeared on Arthur's face. Well, now he has a new henchman. Many ideas immediately appeared in his head. The virtual reality device opened noisily, and a light smoke began to fly everywhere in the room. A girl came out of there. She still couldn't figure out who this strange stranger was. Maybe it was the one her mentor was talking about. With annoyance in her voice, she thought she should have caught it, but the one proved to be much stronger. Her gaze fell on a nearby cell phone. Time showed the beginning of the third girl was frightened. She had completely forgotten about the meeting. Meanwhile, Johann appeared before the host. There are things he has not yet had time to tell, so he will start again. Arthur was impatient to let his servant finish quickly before someone else showed up for him. Next, Johann gave details about his faction. Now they have 2 high-class assassins. Also, this group has ties to very powerful rulers of different lands, which complicates the situation. They also possessed impressive monetary holdings of over 4 billion gold pieces. And it was all meant for the absolute ruler, that is, Arthur. The joy was growing with each passing second. Arthur was trembling with impatience. Could it be that things were starting to get better? He couldn't believe what was happening. He tried to bring himself to his senses. You can't show emotion in public, or they might think something wrong. He stood in front of Johann and said in a serious voice that he understood his devotion and was immensely grateful. The guy said that the 2 billion would remain as is, and that Johann would run the guild as before, since he knows the guild better. Also, the 4 billion they handed over would not only go to the guild, but also to the heavenly devil village. Johann couldn't believe his ears. He was so enthusiastic that he vowed to spread the news of the fairest lord in the world everywhere. Meanwhile, Arthur rejoiced at last. Everything began to work out guild in his hands. Life is getting better. But there was something else. Arthur interrupted his joy and stared at Johann. The man said in a concerned voice about the third elder, "He is a very dangerous man who should be careful. This man is quite different. He knows no pity and is very cunning and dodgy. Rexor is a dangerous opponent. He attacks without warning and even more unexpectedly than Johann himself." Arthur didn't understand why he was so worried. He was an assassin, so why worry? Hearing that this person was the head of the Black Blossoms, the player was surprised somewhere he had heard this name before. Opening the menu with information, Arthur searched for Johann continued to kneel. It appeared that the owner of the first and second throne was confirmed. In that case, let whoever wants to attack now has nothing to fear. He has the guild in his hands, and his sister is on the 7th throne. Before he could finish his thought, he heard his sister whispering to him that something serious was going on. Seiya was terrified. She screamed that she had recently met a close friend, and the friend had told her something very important. My sister was sitting in a cafe, staring at her phone waiting for a friend they had an appointment with. Finally, the friend showed up, and Seiya greeted the girl cheerfully. The stranger turned around at the voice and shrieked fearfully. She looked for her friend with her eyes. In front of her stood Zi Song, a tall girl with long black hair. She waved her hand in greeting. The two girls sat down across from each other at a table and started talking. Suddenly, a strange man came up to Zi Song and said that she was his ideal girl, and could the girl give her phone number. Clearly embarrassed, she looked away and said she wasn't here for that, so let her go somewhere else. The man was extremely puzzled, and by the clock, the back of his head quickly hurried to hide, "How can you even call a stranger your ideal?" Shisung grinned. She couldn't stand those who only focused on appearances and were forever trying to get to know each other. But Seiya was of a different opinion. She said that her friend was so beautiful that she could fall in love at first sight, so it was no surprise. I blushed with shame and embarrassment when I heard my friend talk about her fear of men, but it was nothing like that. But her friend didn't stop talking. She said that even at the academy, Sisong was called the Ice Princess because of her coldness. Folding her fingers in front of her, her friend blushed even more and called Seiya a meanie. She's so rude about it after all. Seiya instantly turned the conversation to another direction and asked her friend how she was doing. The girl blanched a little. Lowering her eyes, she said she would only share with Seiya and began her story. The girl trembled a little with embarrassment. She finally talked it out and felt better. It's good to have a friend like her to talk to. Soon, the girls said their goodbyes and wishing each other a good day ran off to their respective places. Seiya continued to wave at her friend, but a hurricane was raging inside her. She hadn't even expected the girl to tell her something so shocking need to do something about it ASAP. Soon, she met up with her brother needed to talk, in some quiet atmosphere. Otherwise, she's about to go to the other side of the world. The poor thing drank a glass of water in a gulp and sighed heavily this information no one knows but her. Until now, it was known that absolutely I am evil must fight the saints alone. But as it has become known, the sister's friend is a hidden class that is meant to help in this battle, so-called absolutely necromancer. After drinking another glass of water, the sister confirmed that in that case, it was indeed valuable information. However, I wonder if it's normal for a girl to tell such things. Seiya nodded her head. They can be said to be soulmates, so there's nothing to worry about. Besides, her brother is totally evil, so should know about it. Arthur even choked up. He tried to smooth things over, but it seemed his sister had already guessed it all long ago. The girl sighed heavily and said she was just pretending she didn't know, so let her stop lying. And then she blurted out all the facts I'd noticed. With my brother Arthur, didn't even know what to say, it was all true. Yeah, also plus, she took over the 7th throne after just attacking it. How can you not think after such a fact? Arthur sighed heavily, thinking that he had nothing to say against his sister, who was right about everything. But it was good that she reacted normally. Trying to cheer up, Arthur said that his little sister was incredibly savvy. He thought this would happen. Seiya noticed he looked silly. And by the way, if the information about them will spread, there will be ill-wishers and all the work will go to waste. So you need to act carefully. Arthur scratched the back of his head. All right, the situation was getting complicated and we needed to be quiet. The guy thought about it. He needed to meet this maiden, and then he wouldn't have to fight the saints alone. My sister also told me that this girl is now 19 years old. She dropped out of the academy to pursue necromancy. Besides, the brother better wear a mask, so no one will declassify him, if only for a little conspiracy. Arthur put on the stupid mask after all and walked towards the necromancer he felt as stupid as possible. Speaking of which, it's kind of odd that Rufendal, being level 50, fell at the hands of a level 14 necromancer. Soon they did meet. Arthur saw his sister, and the necromancer's girlfriend Seam waved hello. As soon as Zisong noticed who was standing in front of her, she was stunned and had a horned fawn mask on her face as well. And then Arthur also reached the guy dazed, and only with big eyes looked at the stranger. What kind of joke is this in general? They stared at each other, now it was clear. She was the necromancer who wanted to enslave him. It was awkward, and she called him uncle. Arthur almost cried. He's not an old man after all. Yes, and besides, turns out she is a girl. Although the first time the manner of speech was not at all the same, Necromancer laughed. The unfortunate girl covered her face with her hands and was ready to fall to the ground in shame. She should have used a low voice after all. His sister was extremely surprised that they knew each other. Arthur hastened to explain that they had run into each other once before, so now it was all cleared up. The Necromancer girl continued to rejoice. Wasn't it fate? Her friend told her that absolute evil was a very important person to her. She continued to ramble on and on. Arthur just stood there, uncomprehending. Seiya too was confused, as if her friend was overreacting. The player and the sister looked at each other. He said that he is indeed the ultimate evil, and his sister is the seventh saint. As soon as the necromancer heard that, she was stunned. She didn't know what to say. Such a fact hit her in the head like a hammer. Following that, she jumped up to her friend and started rubbing her shoulders. How could she even hide such a thing? In a calm voice, Saint said, "It's her brother's information anyway. So what is there to be surprised about? But she's still very sorry." As soon as Seo Sung found out, she was immediately horrified. She didn't even have time to dress properly to look like a human. Turning to Arthur, she shouted that she looked very different in real life, so don't let him think anything different, especially after their meeting. The player scrunched up her face, though her sister had told her she was quite mature, for now the guy saw in front of her only a small child. He said that this is not the most important thing. Necromancer said that she had to become an absolute evil that has received the quest correctly. The girl was beginning to come to her senses and confirmed of course she was. Holding out a scroll to the boy, she asked, "Look at this. This is the inheritance left by the teacher." Unfolding the scroll in front of him, Arthur began to read what looked like a map, and the more he read, the more he wondered. The boy immersed himself in the memories as he practiced with his teacher. The old man called him over and said it was very important that Arthur even took a little time out from his training. The guy continued to read the map. His eyes became more and more rounded with surprise. One mark caught my attention was a small red light, with eyes this pattern that symbolizes the black flame, as the teacher said. The appearance of this sign can't be a coincidence. Arthur frowned. That's how easy it would turn out. Looking at the necromancer, he wondered if these were really players who had gotten a quest to help an absolute evil, somehow hard to believe. But all indications were that it was indeed his minions who would help along the way. Handing the scroll to the necromancer, Arthur said that for now, they should just move out. The girl didn't understand anything about where they should go. Pointing his finger at his new acquaintance, Arthur said that he had heard from his sister that she was only level 14, so he needed to raise it. This was where their training began. They stood in front of the huge giant bear and prepared to attack. The saint took down the monster with a single blow. The necromancer standing nearby marveled at her friend's skill. Rufendal has also raised his level. The guy hasn't realized how much he's growing up yet. Hearing his pet's voice, Arthur turned. Did someone raise his voice? Rufendal shook his head fearfully. The guy immediately understood the order and rushed to get the artifacts. Now he was acting as a pet in the punishment. He immediately returned with a blue pebble in his hands, which he immediately presented to his host. Arthur nodded his head. This, of course, now looked like madness, but will soon bear fruit. Treatment buffs, level increase, and so on. Rufendal even thought that life was beginning to improve, but immediately pulled himself together. Was this really what he was aiming for? Arthur watched the necromancer and watched the level rise. This girl seemed quite capable to him. Saint asked, "Did her friend still hunt alone?" Sisong nodded. Until then, she was doing well with her skills. She's a little clumsy on the outside. Yeah, and she can barely fight, but there's something about it. Well, this girl had one ability to control the undead. Once she summoned the skeletons, Seiya even trembled in fear. In fact, the undead that had returned from the other world were much stronger than normal. The necromancer stroked one of the skeletons. With such underlings, Arthur can poke at the Empire's savvy when the elders can't move freely. Meanwhile, the necromancer and the saint continued to destroy the monsters with their skeletons. And Arthur was watching everything with a smile on his face. Now everything was going as well as it could go. And the necromancer quest, left to her by none other than Arthur's own mentor, is going to be a hell of a challenge, but that's okay. Looking back, the guy was really glad that these two had joined him. Unlike the game, his luck in life had not suffered. Suddenly, Sisong crashed into his back with a shout that her level had finally increased. The girl was acting like a child. Arthur was even a little frightened by this pressure. The others just laughed. After all, the necromancer was a funny girl. With a smile on his face, the guy told her to finally get off his back. Yes, and also go to the other side of the world if she lied. Then turned to pet Rufendal, immediately rushed to retrieve the artifacts that had fallen out. Arthur raised his finger meaningfully. Now that the necromancer has gotten to level 20, you need to do a quest in the mountains of Cargonis. The girls nodded their heads. Luna and Marion, that was the name of the saint, and the necromancer will not be caught. If it works, let them go ahead and gather information. And Arthur and his pet will travel onward and catch up with them through the Union teleporter. The pet standing next to Arthur wondered what if they didn't succeed. The guy shrugged his shoulders and in any case had to start. Traveling in ships and airships was too time-consuming, and they could be spotted. So we need to think of another option. And teleporters that are controlled by the state are cheap. They are few, so few people use them, but Chaotite can't go there. The girl looked surprised at the teleporter from which the two strange men emerged. They, along with the other guard, looked at the arrivals who were emanating chaos magic. Moreover, there were even two of them. Folding his arms across his chest, the guardsman greeted the great guests with irony in his voice. The pet was surprised. He thought there would be a lot of trouble here, but that's how it turned out. Arthur replied that this was a no-battle zone. The guard approached and said that this teleport belonged to them, and hoped that the new arrivals had enough money to pay for the use. When he looked closely, he noticed one of them had blue hair. It must be Rufendal himself standing before him. Did the evil lord bring a henchman with him? The pet became wary and prepared to attack in case of anything. And then the unexpected happened. Thinking that it was addressed to him, Rufendal said that he had bought it to help his assistant pick up artifacts. Before doing so, Arthur told his pet to pretend to be in charge, as if he were in charge for everyone's safety. The guardian wondered in order to collect artifacts sounded kind of weird, and why didn't he take someone more suitable? This is after all such a tiny level with fear in his heart. The pet, feeling his master's gaze on him, tried to hold back. In the end, he couldn't stand. What did it even matter? Standing behind Arthur laughing, the pet looked extremely funny. The guardian eventually got fed up. He said that for players of their type, the normal price tag doesn't apply. As soon as Rufendal heard the price of 30 million, he opened his mouth in astonishment. The guard smiled and said that if they didn't like something, the exit was in the other direction, and pointed his finger somewhere. There was no other way out, and the pet gritted his teeth and was ready to fall through the ground. The guard knew perfectly well that there was no other way out for these two, so they would pay anyway, but the pet continued to scream. Rufendal asked how the normal way differs from this. Arthur continued to stand and listen. Suddenly, someone started whispering in his ears. It was the very guard. He was addressing him with contempt. The man asks if Arthur's tired of living like this. It's so humiliating to be a pet. He'll help him if the guy agrees. A smile spread across the player's face. So that's how he is the leader of the Grand Alliance, and Arthur thought it wouldn't happen. Well, we'll have to use all the arsenal. Guy cried and started begging to be let in, because that's the way to go. Being on the other side, Sisong was beyond happy. Finally, she and her friend arrived at the place. The girls were already in the mountains. Teleport was so fast that it didn't take a moment before they found themselves on the spot. The necromancer was still worried that Uncle wouldn't be able to get in. He was a chaosite, but her sister reassured her Arthur was smart. In a slightly guilty voice, Sisong asked nothing, calling him Uncle honestly. She didn't think that this person was really an adult. Arthur said they're only 7 years apart, so why does she call him Uncle? But Seiya told the girl not to worry. Let her call it whatever she wants. Sisung apologized and said that they seemed to be in big trouble. The poor thing was looking at the map and couldn't remember the way. Seiya shuddered and said she knew where to go, but she seemed to be lying. The man standing in front of the teleporter as a guardian was a level 40.5, a low level for a battle with the Union leader. The reason he's doing this job is because his aunt was one of the board members of the Union. This man's life was a win-win. Starting with Ellen, he had always had a good position. And now this man stood before Arthur and savored his superiority with a gleam of delight in himself on his face. Arthur, on the other hand, was carefully playing the part of the hapless traveler who wanted to move on. Surely this guard must have thought that Arthur, the ordinary player guy, had turned to Rufendal. Arthur said that this guard was now trying to betray him by talking him into another man's deal, so let him pretend he didn't suspect anything at first. After they go straight through the teleporter, Arthur will strike, so let the pet do the right thing. Arthur has one good skill. He will only trigger it when they go through the teleporter. Pet agreed. Keep playing the role of Master Rufendal demanded money, and Arthur began frantically searching for it. It seems the pet got too much into the role and started screaming for the owner to move, but it seems he overdid it. Soon they passed the teleport and were north of the mountains, coming out of safety. The boys were already being followed by that brazen guard. They were about to attack and were sitting in ambush. Arthur lunged at the pet, shouting that it would no longer obey, and ordered it to pretend that Rufendal was surprised. Thank goodness Arthur reduced the force of his strike and did no damage at all. They started fighting amongst themselves. Thank God Arthur put a buff on his pet, so let him fight with all his might. The attackers hiding behind the branches decided to cast anti-magic on them and then attack stealthily from afar. Reincarnation didn't even feel the spell being cast on him, so he continued to attack. The guy at the last moment noticed that from the back, two people were flying at him, putting out their weapons. The pet was fully prepared. Arthur just watched his pet fight the others, and a guard was already approaching him. Yves drew his longsword and contemplated how he would deal with this worthless player, and that was the end of his role. Arthur noticed that his opponent was approaching him from behind and was ready to fight back. But to the Guardian's surprise, the player just stood there and did nothing, receiving the strongest blow to his back. But it was all according to plan. Arthur smiled and was ready for it. His body took no damage, like a tickle. But then the unforeseen happened. Arthur quickly turned around and punched his opponent in the jaw with his fist. The guard, who was expecting nothing of the sort, flew off somewhere far away from what had just happened. The man rubbed his face. His stamina had not diminished, so why didn't he strike any blow, especially with this man? Meanwhile, Arthur got a little frustrated he didn't apply the boost to his attack, so he hit pretty weakly. But the guard was furious how this worthless man dared to hit him. He was about to go to the other world. Arthur looked at him with irony at what he was just saying. Since Yves had attacked first, so why all the accusations? Behind their backs, there was also a duel going on as the pet fought several players and scattered them like toys. One of the attackers shouted that it was misinformation. They were too strong, so we should retreat immediately, but he didn't have time to say anything. Reincarnation used a heart attack on him, and the man felt his entire body stiffen with unseen fear. The pet was beyond happy with his specialization. He was able to defeat 5 by himself. The boy waved at Arthur and shouted that for this he would rub his shoes for the rest of his life. Brother. Once a brother, forever. Jumping up to his master, the pet asked why this enemy was still alive. Arthur replied that if he finished him off, there would be no items. The guard realized the situation he was in and promised to give all the money he demanded for entry, every single coin. Hearing such impertinence, Reincarnation barked at him, and the guard immediately changed. He lowly gave them up. Meanwhile, Arthur was nudging him to finally deal with this rogue. Reincarnation was already preparing to deliver the final blow. The Guardian agreed to 70 million. He was willing to even increase the amount to stay alive as much as he wanted. But the pet was already ready to apply his skill, and as if not listening to him, the Guardian still increased the amount of 100 million. The pet literally felt his master's joy in his back, but Arthur was still not enough. He demanded more and more. Reincarnation, who had already gone completely mad, demanded some exorbitant 130 million for moral damages. The unfortunate man realized the strong hands gripping his throat and agreed, so be it, he would take them to a safe area and give them the money. The pet went into a rage. What other safe zone, and was ready to apply a heart attack. Eve immediately held out a bag of gold. They literally robbed him of everything, and the enraged guard headed back. What a shame it was after all. The vile chaosite robbed him of so much money. But thank God he got out alive. Arthur said that such people are very bad. They corrode society and make other people worse. There was no other choice. Arthur ordered his pet to send the scoundrel to the other side, and Reincarnation took off after the guard. The unhappy man noticed the danger approaching him. He cried out that they had promised to spare him. But no one was listening. The pet had already kicked him in the back with such force that the man almost broke in half. Reincarnation just went wild. He was ready to turn the guards to dust for the sake of his eldest. It seems the guy was slowly going insane. To his dismay, his opponent died after only one blow. Yves was in a panic. He had been cheated and robbed. Reincarnation rummaged through his opponent's inventory and noticed a small key and immediately pulled it out into the light. The guard noticed this and was horrified. He said that if the guys returned the item to him, he would immediately pay them 1 billion gold without delay. Here the pet paused. Did such a large sum for just one item, but the guard seemed not to be joking. The guy wanted to make fun of the victim and said that he wouldn't return the guard as if struck by lightning. Reincarnation ran up to the older man with a smile on his face and said he was finished. Arthur saw the bag in his pet's hands and asked what it was. In response, Reincarnation said it fell out of the type, who offered him 1 billion if he returned it. Arthur was interested. He opened the pouch. What must be in there if it's worth that much? But it turned out that there was nothing of value in the pouch. Although, why then offer such a sum for its ransom? There were only a few unique items, all of which were not worth half of what the guard was offering. Perhaps there was more. Arthur gave the bag of 30 million to his pet as a reward. Rufendal nodded happily and promised to shine shoes for the rest of his life. Then Arthur said goodbye to his pet and said he would contact him when he reached the continent. Rufendal waved happily after him. The player rejoiced with all his soul. The main thing now belonged only to him. Everything was working out just fine. Soon, he came to the others. His sister was already greeting him with a joyful smile. The necromancer said that thanks to the saint, they had reached the intended destination on the journey. Arthur rejoiced. This was great news. Frowning necromancer said that there is some more news among the local NPCs. There is a rumor that a strange monster is appearing in the area. Even the high-level team that entered the forest was destroyed. This is after all the truest mystery. The girl was blazing with excitement. Arthur thought about it. It all sounded very interesting, but he didn't remember his quest, saying anything about it anyway. He should go and look into it. Soon, the undead army was already attacking the huge forest tiger monster, roaring at the top of its voice, and the necromancer was controlling the undead. Shisong was glad that she was able to raise her level. Uncle's skill is really incredible. At this rate, they will quickly reach their goal. Arthur praised the girls. They were doing pretty well themselves, even without the help of his buff, but necromancers are undead. Surprised, Arthur saw the girl hugging the tiger and the rest of the monsters that really after each destruction calls them back. Soon behind the necromancer's back, there were more monsters returning from the other world. The girl asked her if her mom was okay. And besides, the bigger the army, the better isn't that how the necromancer smiled with joy. Arthur looked around at everyone. If you add more undead in the shadows, you get about 200 heads. That's real legal cheats. Shisong opened the map and began to study it. They were already at the location. He asked the necromancer if she really knew how to navigate maps, and the girl confirmed without a doubt that this was the place. Looking up, the guys saw a responsible rock towering above them. Just don't tell me you'll have to climb up there. Unfortunately, it turns out they can't even fly here, so we'll have to climb up. Arthur was already contemplating a plan of action, but the necromancer shouted for them to immediately look up and look. Irritated, Arthur looked up to see what else was going on. And indeed, a bird flew at them from the sky like a stone, opening its wide, sharp beak and flashing its eyes. It was the cruel Carria, a huge bird lord of these mountains. Its wingspan reached several meters. When hunting monsters, blue stones appear from them, so if this bird eats one of them, it becomes stronger and cleaner. With irritated eyes, Arthur looked at the bird. It reminded him of a chicken. Would he really have to fight it? But he had a plan. The guy let himself be grabbed. His girlfriends immediately squealed in fright at what he was going to do. But Arthur, being in the bird's clutches, only glared at her. How dare she even look at him with such disdain? He swung at the flying chicken and hit it in the stomach. If it could take one punch, he could keep it alive. The bird was about to release its prey from its clutches when Arthur jumped up. The guy smiled. Well, she's holding up well, so the guy will make her his pet, so let her live for now. He grasped his broad head and readied his fist. It was time to stretch a bit. Carria twitched in horror. The bird saw perfectly well that some powerful explosion was coming towards its head, but could do nothing. In a second, only feathers remained in the air. Girls looked at it all with bated breath. Did it really work? It's time to use the equipment obtained in recent battles, namely the Tamer's Ring. Now it seems Arthur will have a new pet. The guy smiled a wide grin. Now this ptah belonged to him. He applied the Tamer Ring, and the bird lit up with a green light. The magic penetrated its body. The incredible level of intelligence of this monster was confirmed to be much higher than human intelligence. Soon, the bird lost all strength and crashed to the ground. The girls standing nearby closed up a bit so they wouldn't be covered in dust. Carria was lying on the ground, and Arthur was lying on top of her content and smiling. Taming turns out to be a pretty cool thing. Necromancer was surprised to find out that this uncle had so many talents. Saya was surprised to find out if her brother could tame monsters. Her sister was somehow perplexed. She wasn't sure if her brother's skills were even geared towards this. Arthur looked at the sign in surprise. He didn't expect to see his pets have such a high rank. I remember only the Monster Master's wyvern had such a high rank. Arthur continued to sit staring at the bird, which was muttering to itself. But fortunately, it was alive. The player decided to stir up the bird a bit and rattled a bag of gold coins in front of its face to try to stir it up. As soon as the bird felt the tinkling of gold coins above his ear, he immediately woke up and seemed to like it. Turns out taming was even easier, but the girls just looked at it from afar and didn't understand how this was even possible. Now the problem with moving was solved. The guys jumped on the bird and began to climb up in a flash. Arthur sat in front and leafed through the map. The necromancer looked over his shoulder and asked if they had been able to figure out the exact location. Arthur said that even though he's strong, he doesn't have the skills for mining, and the game itself doesn't encourage it. Just in case, he ordered the others from below to pound the rock to at least get some useful materials, but the conditions were not right. The guy ordered everyone to hold on tight to Coco. The girls wondered what else it was. It turned out that was the name of their new pet. Arthur ordered her to fly at full speed over the top of the cliff. Then he looked at his fist in surprise at the terms. Is it really all about them? Following this, the guy touched his bird and filled it with energy. Coco began to fly even faster. In front of them, the same black flame was suddenly revealed. A strong attack with the energy of a heaven-conquering mind technique was confirmed. Arthur didn't even quite realize what it was and put his fist forward for a possible attack. A notice appeared in front of them. 200 monsters were required as a sacrifice, and there was also a time limit. They hovered in the air and looked down. If the necessary sacrifice is not made within the allotted time, the rock will collapse. And then the guy had an idea in his head. He has a necromancer who is supposed to serve the ultimate evil. He turned to Zisong in Arthur's mind, a definite thought already forming in his mind. The guy asked, will this many monsters be downstairs? The sister had already opened her mouth to object. There was even more down there. With the naked eye, you could see that there was a whole horde of monsters. In any case, it is necessary to fulfill the requirements, but the girl doubted it was impossible to do so. The necromancer said that she cared a lot about these monsters, and Arthur wondered what she was talking about. She can communicate with the undead. Can't the monsters say they don't want to do it? But the girl said that's not the case. And then Arthur heard that Zisong quietly sobbing. The sister behind him was horrified. Arthur tried to calm her down and let her think it over. She's in the same boat as them, and besides, the master commands it. Let her rise to the level where she will be above us and below only one person. Arthur's voice stopped serious. There's only one step in the journey now. If they fail, it's all downhill from here, so don't hesitate. The sorceress almost cried. She knew it, but it was too cruel to use such a thing. Seiya, sitting behind her, turned to her brother. She wanted to say something. Arthur turned to her. The girl said that since the necromancer didn't want to, she must have her own reasons for not doing it. Nevertheless, there was no choice. Arthur said that if the necromancer didn't do it, their paths would part. He wouldn't cooperate with anyone who stood against him. The girl had to make up her mind. Either she sacrifices the monsters, or they become enemies. Unfortunate. After a short thought, she still agreed to go together with the uncle, so the girl nodded her head. A smile spread across Arthur's lips, and he realized that this decision had not been easy for her, so he thanked her. Being an absolute-level necromancer, she had to sacrifice so many monsters around the girl. A dark energy began to form. The undead that had so recently walked the earth began to return to the afterlife again and dissolve into thin air. Zisong shouted from the tension as the girl concentrated all of her strength that she had, and there was no other way out. Looks like it was a side skill of her class. Arthur applied emergency treatment, let only her bear with it for a while. It was soon over. The undead were defeated, and she felt calmer at heart as Arthur continued to treat the necromancer. The player leaned over to her and said that the girl had really gotten uneasy. Maybe she should still use the healing skill. But the girl looked at him with tired eyes and grinned and said that she was fine and her characteristics had increased. But the saint was furious and started to rub her brother's neck. He's out of his mind. Let her see how pale Sehun is. Beneath them, something shattered like glass. Space began to distort. The conditions were met. The gate opened. A frightened Coco headed straight down. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they had to move forward. Soon, the team found themselves in an underground cavern. It was quite cozy despite the general atmosphere. Seiya had doubts and asked if this was the right place. Arthur said it was correct according to the instructions. Although inside, he realized that his mentor was a nasty old man and that they would have to go through hell. The notices stated that the ultimate evil would need to destroy the 7 holy thrones, and to do so, he would need powerful helpers. There was a small silence as all the other participants had to give their consent for their abilities to be tested. Arthur realized that the quest was designed with the assumption that there would be no turning back. In fact, now there was one main scenario of Olympus. From the very beginning, it was impossible to go backwards, but Arthur was not going to do it. The boyfriend asked his sister if she had received a notice that she had to give consent. The girl smiled and nodded her head. Yes, after all there was, she had traveled here with her brother, and give her consent. The necromancer also smiled and gave her consent to become an assistant. It seems the girl didn't even doubt the decision. Next was Coco. The bird flapped its eyes and cawed, seeming to understand nothing at all. Arthur realized what needed to be done and poured out a handful of gold coins in front of the bird, and the bird's eyes bulged with surprise. A second later, a notification appeared that all participants had agreed to cooperate. The only thing left to do was to go through the portal. Arthur looked in front of him and smiled. He didn't know what would happen next, but he didn't doubt it. At this time, there was a man sitting in the office, talking on the phone, and the voice on the other side of the receiver was extremely concerned about the situation. It was the same guard that Arthur had tricked. The man was now furious that some beggars had dared to cheat him. Who would have thought that the same Rufendale and the man loitering beside him would turn out to be so cunning? Eve plunged into his laptop and began searching for pertinent information. He was bound to find this man and get his money back, as suddenly a phone vibrated on the table. It was his brother calling to say he'd seen the latest news and thought he'd call. On the other side in the phone line was Kang Mu Seok, a man saying that he had already become the first Holy Throne and would surely catch that criminal. While in the cave, Arthur turned his head to see if from here they would reach their destination separately. Suddenly, the guy noticed a huge bird standing in front of him. The monster looked at him with burning eyes and prepared to attack. But only one blow was enough for the monster to fall to the ground and went to the other world. The player coped with him without any problems. He was even a little disappointed that the bird was weaker than Arthur thought. The same three-legged crow that had terrified the guy with its size during his training. The boy wondered if all these 2 decades his teacher's head had been filled with only one thought of making him the most powerful. While elsewhere, the saint continued to destroy monsters with lightning strikes, her rod burning from the overabundance of energy. Her skills grew by leaps and bounds, and the girl was even a little surprised at her progress, but she was still happy about it. Meanwhile, the necromancer was also terrifying the monsters with her army of skeletons and subjugating more and more slaves. Stretching her arms forward, Sisong shouted for her new army to approach her overlord. The soldiers who had come back from the other side of the world were moving straight towards her, looking terrifying but obeying their mistress. The girls said that anyone who went against the will of their Lord Marion would suffer a terrible fate. The girl rejoiced. She now possessed almost 1,000 units of combat power. On her face spread a satisfied smile. How wonderful it was. The huge vile worm opened its wide maw and moved towards its victim. Coco easily defeated monsters with her huge clawed paws. For her, it was a paradise. She was eating blue stones by the dozens and getting stronger and stronger. The bird seemed happy. The task was successfully completed and the whole team reunited in a place the guys did not expect so soon. Each of them managed to raise several dozen levels. It was just an amazing result. Everyone rejoiced. But Arthur told them not to relax too much. The main test prepared by the Celt opens. They could be split up again like they did before, so don't panic. But suddenly he heard a familiar voice. In front of him was none other than his old man teacher, and was glad that his student had finally arrived here. But it was just a hologram. Although everyone else was very much frightened, the old man continued to speak. Arthur was furious. He thought they would never meet again. His sister was surprised, so this was the teacher his brother was talking about. The old man scratched his beard and smiled as his apprentice seemed to have achieved the recognition of the elders. The boys stood and looked at the crazy old man, and the teacher continued to talk and praise his student, sitting on a rock. He said he never doubted his choice and ordered Arthur to lead them to the light. The quest had been updated, and everything was now very clear, but Arthur grimaced in displeasure. The scale of the task was simply staggering. You had to create an entire world of the heavenly devil, and how he was even going to do it. Besides, the master said that Arthur should stay here until the child came through to help him, and the boy didn't know what the old man was talking about. The teacher said that only a child with a clear and innocent conscience can learn a special skill. Arthur began to think of something. But the teacher didn't say anything else. He just wished good luck and started to disappear into thin air. The guys started to ask Arthur, do they really have to stand here and wait? The guy shook his head. Not really if we are talking about a necromancer. He looked at Marion. She was the girl who pretended to be surprised, but Arthur only gave an irritated snicker. A sign appeared. The conditions had been met, so we could start the quest. Although Arthur was glad it was over so quickly, but still. This place was made so the necromancer couldn't get here on his own, no matter how hard he tried. That nasty old man. But somehow the quest was completed and counted the reward, which by the way turned out to be amazing redstone. It is worth a whole lot of money. My sister noticed it too. She was over the moon. It was a real jackpot, but Arthur said I shouldn't share it with anyone. Seiya ran up to her friend Marion, congratulating her and rejoicing with her. Seiya asked Necromancer also got the same thing. Marion looked at the tablet and said no, but in return, she received a boost in characteristics and an unlimited supply of mana. She explained that these abilities were extremely valuable to her, and Saint immediately began to congratulate her with a smile on her face. Arthur even became a little uncomfortable. Although the Necromancer speaks plainly, but she can control an unlimited number of undead. Coco also received a boost. Her rank began to increase and evolve. The bird began to glow. Now the monster had increased in size, and his rank had increased proportionately. Now Coco looked very different. Turns out their bird is a male, judging by the way he's showing off in front of the others. But it seems Arthur Distracted is back to the bonus points of characterization. He just needs the extra points. He had increased his basic heaven-conquering mind technique. Now something changed in the guy's body. He felt much stronger. Meanwhile, outside, Eve was furious. The men who had deceived him so brazenly had disappeared, and now no one could find them. In front of him stood Crimson Gladiator First Holy Throne, part-time his brother, and said that the mountain was blocking the passage. There already gathered a real army of adventurers. In search of the main culprit, they had to find the creeper by all means. Just as suddenly, someone noticed something strange up on the cliff above, and the commanders looked up. Literally from the rock itself, a strange creature like a huge eagle appeared, on which sat several people covered in dark energy. It was the same villain everyone in this town was looking for. Now the guy had changed. He was really much stronger. While in the cave, Arthur once again pumped up his stats, and was now much more powerful than before. In response to the girl's enthusiastic inquiries, Arthur replied that the characteristics were already high, but now they had increased by another 10. Marion looked at him and asked if it was true that the characteristics had crossed 100 units. Arthur smiled and replied that he had long since crossed the threshold. As suddenly a notice appeared in front of Arthur, the final condition for passing was to strengthen the mind technique, opened his eyes and plunged into darkness. Despite the tons of traps Grandpa had set, Seiya told her brother to look down. There was obviously something interesting. Arthur looked down at the men with surprised eyes at what was even going on there. There were a lot of bounty hunters there, pointing their fingers at the flyers and couldn't believe they were seeing it. After her brother left the fire trail behind him, Seiya asked if it would be better to just walk out of there, but Arthur shook his head. As the first throne suddenly appeared behind him and greeted Arthur, the player ordered the girls to put on their robes. The Crimson Gladiator was smiling so far. His enemy had managed to run away from the law quite well, but not this time. Great Gladiator looked at the others. All the cameras were pointed at him now. Everyone will see how great he is. Releasing the jets of fire from his hands and feet, Gladiator apologized, but he must defeat Arthur by all means. The man's face stretched in a smile. Everyone was now looking only at him. It was truly impressive. The man was bathed in attention. Coco grabbed his torso, but the man didn't seem to be paying attention at all and kept talking about something. The bird viciously cawed and threw his opponent right into the wall. Gladiator did not even immediately realize what had happened. The eagle was furious. This worthless man had dared to scorch his wings, and now the bird would destroy him. Shivering with fear, Gladiator coughed. It turns out that the monster was a high-level man, was too careless. With disdain turned to his opponent, he is still alive there, or as it seems, he has been badly pinned down. The player said only one phrase: if Gladiator doesn't attack first, then no one will touch him. Musyok was furious that this criminal was still taunting him. Eve, who was standing below, was surprised that his brother had decided to do away with the villain, but he had originally just wanted to arrest him. The man's whole body was on fire. He was furious and ready to burn everything in his path, especially this worthless criminal. The sister looked at Arthur and said that they would also fight. After all, this person has a high level, but the player said, do not interfere. Standing on the bird, he looked at his opponent. Besides, it's extremely dangerous for his sister to get into a fight like this, so let her stand aside. Arthur's smiling face made it clear that he was fully prepared, so whether his opponent would attack or not. The gladiator looked at him fiercely. Well, if the enemy is so confident, then it's time to start. The man was all engulfed in flames. Without a second thought, Arthur moved forward. This gladiator is weaker than he is, so he can easily defeat the man with a single blow. Now that he has become totally evil, he will no longer run away. Arthur said this, and with a powerful blow, knocked the gladiator backwards. Museok. Feeling his armor begin to break down, the man realized he was messing with the wrong person. Arthur was even surprised to have survived the first blow. Perhaps he wasn't as weak as he was thought to be. The gladiator, meanwhile, was trying to regain consciousness, but his opponent was pretty good. Arthur continued to taunt. Is this really all the first throne gladiator was capable of? He began to release such jets of fire that even Arthur, who was many meters away from him, felt the intense heat. The gladiator clenched his teeth, the power literally overwhelming him, but Arthur just watched. He's ordered Coco to defend the others well. He's going to deal with the little bugger in the meantime. Is it finally a good fight? Without a second thought, Arthur rushed forward. It was time to test the durability of this gladiator. Fury glistened on his face. His office ordered him to immediately take control of the local media so that no one would know what happened today. The man bowed and said it would be done, even though it would be too difficult to hide such a major failure of their company just like that. After he heard that the boss will personally make sure that the scene where the chief goes to the dead world did not get into the public domain, he was scared. Gladiator said he didn't lose at all. He just dropped out of the game. Let everyone think so. But seeing the confusion on his subordinate's face, the gladiator became furious. Why is he even being looked at like a dead man? Should he tolerate being treated like this because some criminal was able to defeat him? Subordinates only stood silent. Finishing the rage, Museok ordered to clean up the office. He had created a real chaos here, practically tearing it to shreds. The man pondered. While everyone is in a huge delusion, vested interests are overlooking incompetent individuals. The world is slowly forgetting that everything here works. It's only because of users like them that the assistant is wary. The boss said that in a few years, this world would be organized completely so that people like this criminal would never appear again. Meanwhile, being in the world of the game, Arthur sat on Coco's back and headed instead of destination. Soon, they will be there already. The guy was very happy with the pet. Stroking the bird's head, he said that Coco seemed to be in a good mood from the fact that it was just the two of them flying together. Meanwhile, Coco was thinking about how strong his master was, that he destroyed the man who had scorched his wings with just one blow. Soon, they had arrived at the Red Devil's lair, and the bird was playing with the children outside while Arthur went to deal with pressing matters. He rummaged through the papers on which was printed a strategy on how to survive the next cold winter, for it was just around the corner. They'll need warm clothes and heaters, which aren't cheap, and getting them here will be a challenge. The aide said that they would need at least 800 million gold coins to realize this plan. Arthur continued to leaf through the report. He was curious to know how they survived the winters before the arrival of absolute evil. Well, the guy smiled and praised the excellent plan after all. Investment is an important thing. He nonchalantly handed the sheet with the plan back and said he would do everything, although inside himself, he cried at such waste. Serdian said that they would need then nearly 1.5 billion gold coins. Arthur was a little surprised, but still he had no other option but to agree, and the assistant ran joyfully out of the room. Despite the fact that he had to spend quite a lot, but the guy still reached the right level, and now the hunting grounds are open to him. In his den, Johann stood on the balcony and stared into the night darkness with a silent gaze. He waited for the meeting, and soon the man appeared. Coming out of the darkness was dressed in bright white clothing. The stranger walked past Johann and said nothing. Now the situation was different, and the man agreed. They had a conversation where it became clear that Johann could sense the energy of mind technology. It was Rexor, the head of the Black Flower faction, who said that there would never be a ruler weaker than him. Johann wondered if this man could really defeat the Lord. He was much stronger now. But the man didn't seem worried in any way. Despite being restrained by several inhibitions so far, there was nothing to worry about. But Johann's thinking was different from his colleague. He didn't want to get into a confrontation. He seemed to know himself that the Overlord was restrained by inhibitions. It seems he had returned from his expedition. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his head, and it was the same energy. Did he know that the Overlord at this moment became even more powerful than he was before he became almost absolute evil? Even without equipment, he can fight on par with the Elders, because the Overlord is no longer as weak as they think. Rexor listened attentively to his interlocutor and did not say a word. He recognized that the Overlord was no longer so weak. Besides, Johann said his lord would provide the inhabitants of the valley with the necessities of the valley, however the same was done during the founding of their guild. In addition, all the expenses of the Overlord related to the Heavenly Devil, Johann is even glad that he was able to contribute to the limitless potential. So we have to wait a little longer. The Overlord has a definite plan for obtaining military funds and will go to that place. In the meantime, they had the opportunity to create their own monsters of every taste and color. It was just great, a real factory. Sitting at the computer, Arthur marveled. It seems they really have a lot of money. This will be a great opportunity for development. The sister wondered why the brother was so reticent to react. He smashed the first throne to smithereens, but he didn't even mention it. Arthur stroked his little sister's head and let her think carefully about whether it was right to announce everything at once. Let her stop being cocky and hide her identity well from prying eyes. If she goes together, hiding will be harder. From the monster generator is pretty big. If you can do the same in the village, it would become completely self-sufficient. His sister turned to him and asked, what was their next goal? Arthur smiled and said a river flowing through the sky. In response to his sister's objection, he said that he knew everything perfectly well. That's why he was going there. This place had exclusive hunting grounds, incomparable to anything on the continent. It was because of this that many members of the high-level guilds of that to catch high-level monsters and get redstones. So the guy decided to take with him Zeta, specializing in extensive magic. She will be extremely useful there. The guy is not going to brag about being totally evil, but at the same time, he doesn't want to hide it. Let everyone slowly know about it. Once in the game world, Arthur ordered Zeta to stay near him and activate stealth. The woman immediately obeyed. The others seemed to be doing fine. Rufendal shouted that his condition hold would soon be removed. Even if he stopped being undead, he could still walk around them, Arthur asked irritably. But the guy didn't seem to mind. He even wanted to go to the other world to become undead again. Arthur sighed. Let them do as they please. And then his sister struck the unfortunate man with a bolt of lightning, and her hand didn't even seem to flinch. Creepy. But Rufendal, on the contrary, was even happy about it. He felt incredibly powerful with dark magic again. His energy was flowing over the edge. Literally, he wasn't kidding. The guy could feel how powerful he had become. He rejoiced in comparison to the last time his strength had increased. Just unbelievably, the guy loved his new friends even more. While Rufendal rejoiced at his new skills, Arthur was surprised. Yes, the necromancer's strength naturally increased a lot. It was decided to move in groups of 2. Arthur and his pet will go ahead and clear the way. The girls will go next. Near the teleport of the river flowing through the sky, there were already a lot of people who were ready to go. As soon as Arthur appeared in front of them with the giant eagle, there was a huge commotion as to where this man even came from. Everyone prepared for battle. Before them stood a man of chaos. Hardly something good could be expected from him. Everyone was running in different directions apparently. This person decided to strike from an unexpected direction. Screams could be heard everywhere. But Arthur and his pets were not going to do anything at all, despite the fact that he was surrounded by a decent number of military men. Arthur decidedly did not understand why they were acting like this. Rufendal said with a smile on his face. They seemed to have realized the true power of those who stood before them. The boy thought that at this rate, his sister and the necromancer would reach their destination without any problems. As far as Arthur could remember, all users used to be able to use teleports freely without restrictions. The guys didn't notice that they were already being followed by an unknown man hiding in the bushes. But suddenly, a huge sphere of fire appeared for everyone. Arthur even tensed up a bit. The pet was worried that they would be attacked again, but Arthur was calm and told Rufendal to block the attack, and he would give him a buff. Of course, Arthur expected something like this, but he didn't think it would be so obvious. His pet immediately rushed to block and put up a huge shield that the fire sphere hit. The guy tried his best. It was obvious he was having a hard time, but he tried not to show it. It was okay. Realizing that there was no problem, Arthur turned back to where something incomprehensible was happening. Mariana stood engulfed in flames and understood nothing. Why all this had happened. Arthur ordered her to duck and be alert here. Very dangerous. The girl looked at him in surprise. At this moment, a few soldiers stood away from them. It was the director of the big Union Blazing Star. A man bored, everything appeared obvious. As suddenly some bird appeared from somewhere, people could not even immediately realize what happened. Everywhere there was wind. The man covered himself with his hands and looked in surprise in front of him. They that survived. How is this even possible? Arthur and the pet sat on Orla Seja, asked her what still can't show up. The guy nodded. Let her stay put until she saw the signal. He managed to protect Marion. Although it was quite dangerous, the girl could go to the other world. When she got to the very epicenter of the explosion, she couldn't do anything and just covered herself helplessly with her hands. The girl was ready to say goodbye to her life, as suddenly Arthur appeared from somewhere and blocked the attack with one movement. And now the girl was even more devoted to her new master. Thanks to him, she could not afford anything. The guild leaders saw that the others had jumped down, and everyone needed to prepare to take the fight. The man was even a little frightened. If they were so easy to get back on their feet after such a hard blow, it probably wasn't easy traveling. One of the guys with the shields moved forward. The boss said he was counting on him, so let him deal with these aliens. Arthur looked at Rufendal and asked if he was ready to record. The guy already had a video camera in his hands. Arthur saw a man with a shield running towards him, shouting that evil can't defeat them. The player said to record the whole course of the battle from now on. This warrior turned out to be the director of the fighting union lumberjack, who had a huge axe and a weighty shield in his hands. The man said he had no idea what brought them here, but they're not getting out alive. Arthur looked at him in surprise, and why they were all so quick to turn against him. What had he done wrong so badly? The lumberjack replied that the fact that they got here, it's a clear act of desecrating their earth, is enough for a conviction. As soon as the Tin Man heard the answer, immediately frowned. Arthur mocked him. This land is not their property after all. A dark aura began to form around the guy again. Since when did they think it was a sin for him to come in here? Seeing what was in front of him made the Tin Man cold. With fear, he did not expect this opponent to be so powerful. Marion summoned her warriors from the other side of the world. The girl was ready to destroy anyone who got in their way. The knights began to rise from their graves. Arthur ordered to tell the union director to come here because he was about to destroy everyone. A monopoly on teleport is way out of line. Let them attack. After such a brazen lunge in their direction to get everyone ready to attack, they will wipe these people out. But no sooner had the man given the order fully than he noticed that Arthur had already approached within striking distance of him. The man didn't even have time to realize that his soul had left his body in just a second. Everything. After quickly dealing with the woodcutter, the rest of the warrior Arthur ordered the soldiers to be destroyed. The rest of the soldiers were horrified. They did not expect their strongest warrior to be so useless, even though he was a tank. The director saw that the enemy was only staying undead, was becoming too much. The man could not control the situation. The commander saw Arthur chatting with the rookie necromancer. How is it even possible to control so many monsters? How much mana does she have? The man said the necromancer must have run out of mana by now. It's just a normal dodge. They want to overwhelm them with quantity. Putting his hand forward, the union director ordered everyone to run to the attack and not to fool themselves. Let them prove that they were not weaklings. Arthur realized he had to choose a different strategy and ordered Marion to call off her warriors and stand aside herself. A phantom aura began to form around the guy. If he reached level 50, then it might be worth trying to use that skill. He has built up an incredible amount of energy in him. If they are not as weak as they say they are, then let them fight. Seeing this, the commander went cold with fear, but still ordered the tanks to block any attacks. But suddenly, the man felt his soul leave his body. Did he really go to the other world from one blow? It was hard to believe. The commander was defeated, and Arthur had the necromancer order the knights to continue the offensive. Everything was ready. A notice board popped up in front of him stating that it was possible to allocate irrational elements. The guy thought for a moment. There was chaos in the office at the Divine Stars directors meeting, and once again, this criminal was to blame. Now the employees were terrified. They didn't know how to resolve the situation themselves to make things fall into place. The fallen commander of the order has heard the order to rise. He has now turned undead without wanting to. Finally, a terrible guess came into his head. Even after he went to the other world, they want to make him a slave. He was ordered to destroy his comrades. Now the man fought hard, but could not resist the dark force. All the soldiers were in utter confusion and horror. They did not understand what was happening to them, but the necromancer rejoiced. Arthur jumped up to the commander and gave him a powerful punch right under the man's breath, almost spitting out his lungs from the force. It was the real jackpot after all. I wonder if it was possible to distribute other characterization points next to it. Was Rufendal collecting items? Suddenly, he turned to his host and said he'd better look over there. Arthur turned his gaze backward. There were 3 leaders of the small union. They looked extremely threatening. One of them told Arthur to surrender, and he could avoid the sentence. The boy looked at them with a surprised look at what they even wanted from him. Did they really think Arthur would give up? The pet said that this trio seemed to be serious. Arthur raised an eyebrow in surprise. Could they really be that strong? On the left was Curdle, a man in only underpants with a very expressive body. He was a master of close combat. The one on the right is called an assassin, also known as a hidden blade-related class. And the most important was Lupin, the one in the armor he specialized in defense, if you think about it. The pet also used the defense stance all the time. In a dismissive tone, Lupin once again said that if Arthur surrendered quickly, he would manage to stay alive, or he wanted something different. The player has already started to get annoyed again. Someone got in his way, he does not need anything from them, so there is no point in fighting. But the man didn't stop. He said he would give him time to think and let him make the right choice. The guys were already starting to approach. Curdle rushed straight for Arthur. He wouldn't hold back just because this kid has no objects. The man's body was all covered in fire. Arthur, on the other hand, just stood there and watched as his opponent's fist approached him at breakneck speed. But it all happened too fast. The pet didn't even quite realize what his master had done. The man's hand stopped right in front of his face. The muscular man stood in front of Arthur and did not understand anything. He did not know how it was possible to dodge his blow. But Arthur, with a calm fucking overall, held his fist, and the man was faster than he thought. The jock, who had no time to think, noticed at the last moment that his opponent's fist was already approaching him. The bodybuilder felt himself going into free flight. He didn't even realize how he was hit, but he was already tumbling in the air. With dumbfounded eyes, Lupin only watched his strongest warrior go to the other world with a single blow. And his opponent was still standing motionless with a ghost aura around him, forming some kind of devil. It turned out that that newcomer was much stronger than the report said. Arthur was already preparing to strike next. The guy wanted to make a mess here, but as suddenly he received a message from Lupin, who offered to negotiate. Arthur did not understand why. The man wouldn't stop. He said if the enemy agreed to fall by their hand, they'd give him a chance to hunt here. He promised very good benefits, but Arthur was getting annoyed. It didn't interest him. He only wasted his time. After hearing all this rant, Arthur said that this is nonsense. They are at their discretion here. The soldier was surprised. Besides, Arthur clearly said he would break the whole monopoly system. If he was a regular player, he would have been given such conditions. During the whole time the live broadcast was going on, viewers already thought that the player was crazy if he went against such strong opponents. In the end, the negotiations were thwarted, so there's no point in talking. Eventually, the whole trinity rushed at Arthur with weapons. They wanted to destroy the impudent man at any cost and regain their power. This is just what Arthur expected. He won't act as low and mean as his opponents. He'll go in head on. His single blow was enough to make the muscular man fall apart into several pieces and go on a respawn. Assassin could not believe it in such a situation. It was necessary to attack not the main villain, but the others who were hiding behind his back. Like necromancers accompanied by undead if they destroy the girl, -1 problem. In such a case, we must act without delay. Assassin rushed straight at the girl who suspected nothing. But suddenly, something didn't go according to plan. The man felt someone approaching him, and he couldn't see it coming. Behind his back, a dark cloud of ominous assassin appeared and froze in place. It was Johann. The man had arrived just in time, and already had his opponent in his sights. A nice try. The commander already saw that his army was defeated and realized that there was no way to win. Before he knew it, all of his warriors had been defeated, and Johann acted as quickly as possible. The head of this guild didn't show himself until the very last day. Did he really show himself after all? The man did not know what to do. He realized that he was in the most hopeless situation. Now, it is not clear how to get out of here, as suddenly everyone heard someone's squeaky voice, and a huge demon towered over them. People went cold with terror. It was Zeta raising her sword in her hands. The woman wished everyone to rest in peace, for now she would destroy them. Arthur just watched from the sidelines and was satisfied. He hadn't even given them a single order, and the guys had already done everything without him. Johann came back to him and apologized for intervening without his order, but Arthur said it was fine. It was even better. Suddenly he received a notice from Lupin. He said that he dared to make a mistake against him and asks for one chance to negotiate. The man was already desperate. He realized that there was no way to win. He begged for one more chance. His eyes were filled with darkness. He was about to say something else, but Arthur approached him with such speed that he didn't even have time to realize it. When their eyes met, he hissed in his ear he wasn't interested, so let him stop trying. And now it was over. Rufendahl was contentedly collecting all the items they had, at last succeeded. Marion approached Arthur and asked if those two were really his subordinates. The boy nodded and said that they would now hunt with them. Suddenly a pet appeared in front of him. The guy happily said that all collected, they managed to hit the real jackpot. so everything is as it should be. The others just looked at him with astonished eyes. What a sincere worker wondering what he had done wrong. Arthur took the pouch and began to rummage through it to see what his pet had managed to collect. Rufendal was happily jumping around. As soon as Arthur saw what was in the bag, his eyes widened and his head felt like it had been struck by lightning. He ordered Coco to descend immediately. The bird looked at his master in surprise. All the others were ordered to get on the eagle's back and get as far away from here as possible, and Johann was ordered to be ready for battle. Zeta asked what had happened, but Arthur didn't seem to know what was wrong at all. There was a rumbling sound, everything began to vibrate, and someone so huge that they couldn't even see it was approaching them. And all this is due to the fact that created an unexpected quest, an appeared boss monster. It was a huge monster created from several monsters. Arthur sighed that it was getting fun. The size was impressive, and he was going to have to do his best after all. Standing on the bird's back, Marion marveled, "Wow, what a huge monster this is after all." The girl looked forward with burning eyes and immediately wanted to get her possession of this monster. She shouted to Arthur, "He is going to defeat this monster after all, so let him give his body to her." The guy irritably nodded his head. Johann said that these monsters were so big that even he would have a hard time dealing with them. The Overlord is weak and should be careful, and it is better to retreat. Hearing that the master was going to defeat the monster right now, the man swallowed his tongue in surprise. And ignore the others. Arthur moved forward. They don't believe in his strength. Johann wanted to say something, but the Lord said to just stand by and watch. Everything will be as it should be, so don't let them worry. Apparently it happened. Because the world reacted to the appearance of absolute evil, Arthur prepared to try. He used his crowning skill around the guy. A wave of dark energy began to form around him, and the water around him began to churn. As expected, if this monster was an ordinary monster, it would immediately attack. But for now, the monster stood still. It was paralyzed. These monsters Arthur could easily defeat, so he was not afraid of anything, but simply looked into the eyes of danger. He ordered the others to watch carefully as their master easily dispatched these monsters. His body began to burn. In the truest sense of the word, energy was overflowing, and he moved forward. It was enough for him to crush the monsters like bugs, and there was a rumble comparable in power to an earthquake. Zeta was completely shocked. She still couldn't believe what was happening, and just watched her lord uninterruptedly. To say the least, Johann was also extremely surprised. He had not expected such a rapid increase in power from his lord. Meanwhile, Arthur was approaching. Everything happened exactly as he had intended. This event was perfect for his debut. Meanwhile, another extraordinary meeting was taking place at the Divine Star headquarters, and they were discussing Arthur's power there. Big Union Director. Divine Star, Yang Jong-hoon sat. So his tablet and nervously looked around. Someone's ingratiating voice asked how you level check results. Ian lowered his eyes and said that the confirmed level 50 guy was extremely puzzled. The head said that the reputation of their alliance has already fallen below the plinth. They know that very well, right? All the other members of the meeting tensed. Now they were going to have a very serious conversation with the head. All present began to apologize. They had no excuse. People understood that they had made a terrible mistake. But the man at the head of the table calmed down. He didn't gather all these people to apologize. The enemy level is still rising. He said that he was extremely puzzled and upset by the fact that the heads of the small alliance did not show discernment. Ian was ready to fall to the ground. Definitely, that Chaos Man is completely out of the ordinary. He is extremely strong, much stronger than expected. Even the Justice Alliance of America sprang into action. When it heard such news, it must be of sufficient strategic value. Kwangmu Huan was the head of the big Divine Star Union. The man was extremely angry. Regardless of what happened, you need to destroy this evil, and there are several people who are helping this psychopath. The man said that in addition to all this, if you pay attention to his past deeds, you might find out something. The man sitting next to him was his grandchildren. It was Mu Seok, who looked at his grandfather with horror, and the leader went on to say that absolute evil is all about wreaking havoc in the world. When you consider all that this man has done during this time, he can fully be considered utter evil. The man spoke completely. Seriously. At this point, Arthur was fighting a huge elephant-shaped monster guy, jumped with incredible speed. He activated all his skills and already aimed at the monster's head to destroy it with one precise strike. Now, Arthur didn't care that he was being hunted at all. His main incentive was to destroy the monster. The boy's eyes were brimming with enthusiasm. If he continued like this, he would destroy this monster in no time. Quan said they have a duty to show the villain that he can do nothing against the majority for the sake of a world where the elite rule the people. And now it was time for the final chord. Arthur swung a crushing blow to the last monster and defeated it. The huge crocodile with two heads plunged into the water with a clatter and raised a splash in the air. Like a fluff ball, Arthur landed next to the boss. Monster was defeated. He was given many rewards. The guy was even surprised by his own strength. It seems that for an absolute evil to defeat such a monster was a mere trifle. I wish they'd give him red stones. They're incredibly expensive. The guy looked at the sign, but to his surprise, the guy noticed that he got 3 black stones. His eyes went to his forehead. How is that even possible? Black stone was the most valuable material in this world, so obtaining it was considered a great event. Among all the stones that were in the world of the game, black stone was considered the most valuable and rare material. In the entire 200-year history of the world, the black stone had only fallen 3 times, and now Arthur had gotten it. The guy was looking at an expensive stone. The cost of this material, taking into account all the components, was simply unbelievable. He thought he'd been practicing for a reason, and now he could buy his sister as many hamburgers as she wanted. The others also noticed that their overlord was glowing with happiness today, and he had demonstrated his talents to the fullest. Johann wanted to say something else, but it seems that they had guests. The man literally vanished and moved back. In front of him stood the 2 director of the Grand Union, Ellen Blueheart, as well as the president of the Justice Union, Capt. Before the captain could say anything else, Johann formed behind him and ordered everyone to stand immediately. Blueheart was startled. Near his throat immediately a blade appeared. The man didn't even have time to think. The American representative also tensed up. He didn't expect someone to approach them so quickly. Arthur didn't even notice the uninvited guests until Johann asked what to do with them. The leaders said they just wanted to talk, but Johann was extremely skeptical. Arthur looked at them with some contempt. What the Americans had forgotten here, he ordered Johann to leave them alone. The man immediately obeyed and literally teleported back in a split second. In a perfectly calm voice, Arthur advised them not to move, unless, of course, they valued their lives. And what did they want to tell him? The guy folded his arms across his chest and waited for further events. He said that their alliances wanted Arthur in their ranks because he was very capable. She offered a very lucrative contract on the terms of which the boy will receive a lot of money and also privileges. The representative of the American Union also wanted to recruit Arthur into his ranks and offered even more favorable terms. The player thought about it. It was tempting, but he seemed hesitant to join their team. Blueheart continued to insist. As long as this person was in their region, one could not ignore the offer from the higher-ups. Arthur suddenly snapped his fingers and said, "So be it." A vortex of energy immediately began to form around him. To be honest, he said that he didn't care about all these proposals. He had his own plans and goals and methods of achieving them, and those who came were very surprised. Arthur turned around and delivered a crushing blow to the crocodiles that were already approaching them at a great speed. The pet immediately collected all the items dropped from the monsters and presented them to his master. Blueheart was shocked. This man's abilities were far beyond what was shown in the video. The captain also looked at him with a puzzled look. Arthur said he could make that 500 million just by not moving. He said he didn't really like the conditions. The guy was going through some red stones in his hands. The captain tried to say something else. He said that there was a slight misunderstanding and that they had better terms. They offer him an annual payment of $500 million. Blueheart poked him in the ribs with a finger. After these words, Arthur was visibly tense, somehow embarrassed, even embarrassed. For a moment, he thought it was about the ones. Blueheart scratched the back of her head, actually. She was talking about Korean One. The captain was horrified. His whole plan had gone awry. They started arguing with each other over the cost of whatever one side sent the director and offered one. The other side offered dollars. The captain stuck a bayonet in the ground and said they weren't forcing Arthur, but if he thought of making a contract, let him do it judiciously. The player smiled. Well, if he did plan to cooperate with anyone, he would put the Justice Alliance first. Blueheart looked towards the departing captain. She had certainly heard that America had great resources, but not that much. Arthur turned to the woman. He asked, "What are they doing?" Blueheart even tensed up a little. The guy smiled and said that if she had nothing else to say, then please let her go back to her room. Or does she want to talk about something else? The woman said that was it, and wished the guy would make the right choice. She gritted her teeth. The American had completely humiliated her. He was talking about dollars. They would never have that kind of money. And besides, how dare some kid treat her like that? He literally humiliated them in public. A sign immediately appeared in front of her asking how it went. She was required to do so immediately. It was the same Eve. He demanded the bag be returned. By all means, this is a very important mission, even no matter what. He then thanked the Blue Heart and disconnected the session. The man was ready to fall to the ground from anger. This crazy man decided to make everyone his enemies. Is he really an immortal? Arthur got out of the virtual reality device and took a shower, thinking about how to use the black stone to arouse less suspicion. Suddenly, the phone on the desk vibrated and he received a call. It was an unknown number the guy had never seen before, but he picked up the phone and heard a familiar voice. It was Marion. She greeted the uncle with joy, and the girl's voice was very happy. But Arthur wondered. He didn't remember giving his phone number to anyone. Meanwhile, the necromancer along with Seiya were sitting in the cafe again. The girl asked if Arthur was busy right now. The boy slowly began to get annoyed, but the necromancer didn't seem to be shy. She said she was with his sister now. Would he like to join? There was nothing to do anyway, so Arthur decided to come to them and began to swivel his head around. His sister waved his hand and motioned for him to sit next to them. Sisong sat next to him, twirling a glass of drink in her hands. Hugging her friend, Saint said it would be nice to meet in real life once, so she shared her number. Arthur remained silent and only looked at her friends with a sizzling gaze. Seiya asked why her brother wasn't talking. He didn't seem to share her enthusiasm. He asked, "These two really want to cause a scandal here or what?" He originally had no plans to meet these two offline and had already said he wasn't going anywhere. Yes, and on top of that, they forced him to drag himself here. Need to be warned of the consequences after such actions. Girls lowered their gaze. Every insignificant word, every random gesture could be a clue. The necromancer was horrified after such a thing. Caution should be paramount. Let the girls at least try to realize this and be much more careful. This applies especially to the necromancer. Never and nowhere let him say his nickname, and it is better not to even mention it, even in his class. Sisson only remained silent, and Arthur asked why there was no answer. The girl waved her hands and said she understood. Seiya hugged her frightened friend and asked her brother what's gotten into him. They were just having a friendly chat, after all, and didn't say anything in particular. But Arthur said in a serious voice that he would scold her too, who even allowed her to use the phone number. Seiya said they were partners. Hearing that word, Arthur gloomed even more. Who's a partner here anyway? She'd forgotten she was supposed to watch her tongue. The extremely pissed-off guy advised them to watch their language. Wherever they are, he has things to do, so goes first. My sister had a little cocktail and called my brother a Parshevik. How can you be so fixated on precautions? It's boring after all. She apologized to her friend for her brother's C. Song only folded her fingers in front of her. She felt guilty about it. She wanted to come to the man in person and say thank you. So a friend organized the meeting. Too bad it turned out that way. And my friend said that as soon as the man sees her, he'll be speechless. And in the end, he doesn't really care what she looks like. As soon as Arthur returned to the virtual world, Rufendell immediately provided him with a list of items he had received recently. The servant's eyes were burning, and he said that he had taken into account all the smallest details and recorded them so that he didn't worry too much. Arthur appreciated such hard work and patted the guy on the head. He did a good job and deserved encouragement. The servant continued to fawn over his master. Arthur realized that it seemed he was only acting this way because he had the black stone. Suddenly, he noticed the small flying video camera that used to belong to Willow seemed to be broadcasting still. After rewatching all the recorded videos, Arthur seemed to understand why he wanted to pay him that kind of money. As soon as the player summoned Johann, Assassin immediately appeared literally out of nowhere. The player said that there is a private teleporter to the northern part of the mountains, and it is run by the Ellen Union. The leader of the group will definitely be on site. Most likely he is busy raising money all over the city right now. Arthur wrote out his sentence and ordered Johann to destroy this man as soon as he saw him and then let him leave the safe zone. Flipping the camera from hand to hand, the guy rejoiced. He was absolute evil, so he would do whatever he pleased. Meanwhile, Eve sat at his computer and could not understand who this Remtadian was and why he thought so much of himself. And what is his brother even going to do? He would have thought so, as suddenly something caught the man's eye. The news was everywhere that the true essence of the absolute of evil had been revealed. Of course, it would be worth recognizing its power. The man wondered why he had touched his brother, and now this man would be labeled as an absolute evil who would even want to cooperate with him. How dare he even behave so brazenly in front of the top leadership of the Union? News of the recent events was spreading everywhere. If the most powerful alliances in this game are pitted against one man, the only thing left to do is wait for him to go to the other side. Even a force that wants to destroy everything has a limit. The man got up from his chair and headed for the exit. Besides, to go to foreign continents would eventually need a portal too. He walked over to the window and looked out over the city. On the screen of the laptop, a website was open on it saying that the legendary Black Stone had already been put up for sale. After this news, absolutely, all players were just shocked. Say, Black Stone somewhere appeared. It was a Korean server. It is said that this kind of stone was incredibly powerful. Compared to the red ones, also with the help of it, it would be possible to control natural disasters. In America, too, the captain was perplexed by the recent news and wondered in what hands such a treasure would end up. At this time, as the president had another employee come into the office with a report, they had a serious problem. Once the president heard that the owner of the Black Stone wasn't going to sell it to the Divine Star, he almost swallowed his tongue. The man immediately jumped up from his seat. It was just impossible. It was just impossible. And when the man heard that the seller was the same Full How and didn't want to sell just because he didn't like the star, he was furious. By the way, Arthur's sister was also furious. The girl was ready to burn everything around her. There were headlines everywhere about what her brother had done and when he'd even managed to get himself in such a mess. As expected, everything that could be of any use to Arthur had disappeared, and the boy sat and studied the information. Looking at his sister, Arthur asked why she was the one kicking everything Saya was holding her leg and yelling that she would sue all those journalists. After that, Arthur tensed up. Do they really want to reveal their true identity? Let them not even think of flaunting the information. The saint continued to rage. How could anyone even write such nonsense in the form of an article? They have no right to say that. Miriam was also shocked. Her sister was absolutely right. How could they write such false articles? Uncle was a very good man. After all, that was how Necromancer puffed with indignation. Arthur was even a little surprised. Did he appear to her as such a good man that he deserved such reverence? He said that it's not important, and everything is already decided. To be honest, this is quite natural. Girls were silent. Now was not the time to worry about such trivialities. Meanwhile, people were checking all possible information. Crunching his knuckles, Arthur said he had the Black Stone, and of course he wouldn't sell it to the Divine Star at no price. On the day of the auction, a real celebration was organized. For this purpose, they rented the whole Colosseum. People came there in droves, each wanting to snatch a tidbit. Serdian asked to be told the exact location a few minutes before the start, then no one can pull some trick. Arthur, along with his minions, stood above, still needing to prepare for the opening. His assistant's advice was very sound. First of all, before entering the auction, everyone will need to disarm. The minimum that can be allowed is wearing armor. Of course, it was a good idea to take the elders with him and also to put guards everywhere, which he did. Naturally, there will be those people who have been banned from participating, and they will be extremely unhappy. People tensed when the voice of the auctioneer was heard as he welcomed everyone to the auction. At the head was Arthur, thanking everyone for taking the time to attend his event, and the currency they would be using was gold coins. If everyone is ready, then it's time to start the auction. Arthur was standing in the middle holding a black stone, and there was a dark aura around the guy. Holding the stone in his hands, Arthur said that the players had to choose the starting price, and then the price of 600 billion was announced. After Arthur heard, he tried to restrain himself, but inside he was thrilled. The numbers were staggering, and it was hard to imagine that people had that kind of money. The player stood in front of the others and held an item in his hands. Prices were rising at a simply insane rate. Arthur felt a shiver run down his spine as prices reached up to 1 trillion. Could anyone really be willing to part with such a fortune? When suddenly some man raised his hand and calmly said 30 trillion, the hall fell silent. The amount was really impressive. It was a rich man from the Middle Eastern North, the ruler of the continent of Pyra-Rendal, and one could only guess how rich he was. But the bid didn't last long. Someone offered 1 trillion more, and Randall was even a little surprised. Well, the man was not confused and immediately raised a finger up. 50 trillion. Seems he didn't feel sorry for any money at all. The people standing a little higher up began to whisper such an amount was really shocking. Serdian was absolutely thrilled. Was anyone willing to offer such a fortune? The woman nearly jumped out of her pants. Arthur announced the amount and asked if anyone would offer more. The guy was wary. When suddenly words came to his ears in the name of a great evil, all were ordered to be destroyed, the guy tensed up who else it was. Looking to the side, he saw an unidentifiable man wearing a strange green cloak and holding a bomb. The man's face was absolutely insane. He didn't seem to doubt his actions. He wanted to do it for his own glory. For the sake of the great and absolute evil, a shot rang out into the air, a column of dust rose up, all the people were shocked. But it wasn't until Arthur, in a calm voice, ordered Johann to deal with it, that Assassin immediately took the hint. Naturally, those people who were forbidden to participate in the auction in every possible way tried to stick their fingers in the wheels. It was not surprising. The aide, on the other hand, was not surprised. It was the worst possible plan one could come up with to self-detonate as ignorant. Someone was standing on the top podium watching what was going on. The stranger had green hair. The man didn't even have time to realize anything before Johann formed behind him and ordered him not to move if he wanted to live. He grabbed the stranger and pulled him to him. It seems they're too fearless if they're planning to make such a mess here. This was starting to annoy Arthur, but really, why can't we just have a normal auction? Everyone had done what Serdian had said without a single iota of deviation from the course. Arthur's gaze was incredibly perceptive. Luxo, who was standing nearby, said that the force of the explosion was enormous, but Arthur said not to worry. There was a shield everywhere protecting the auction items and the bidders themselves. If we're talking about such high-ranking people, safety should have been the first thing to think about. This kind of explosion can't be tolerated by these people. Yes, and besides, the organization of the event was top-notch. Meanwhile, Johann's heavy hand held by the throat, the impostor determined to undermine the honor of the auction. The man held the intruder and demanded that he tell who sent him after all. But it seems it was too late. The man decided to take his own life by swallowing a poison capsule. Returning to his master, Johann apologized he couldn't find out what the cause was, but Arthur praised him. He had prevented the explosion. That's already good. The American participant, Captain, has concluded that this act was committed by some unauthorized person entering here. Everyone started to turn to him. The man said he came here because he thought something like this would happen here. But the captain assured that such incidents would in no way turn them hostile to Arthur. Trying to keep himself in control, Arthur said he was in a bad mood. He didn't know who was behind it, but it was someone who wanted to hurt him. After saying that the Overlord had exhibited this item for the advancement of humanity and world peace, the captain was shocked. Then taking out 2 more black stones, Arthur said he wouldn't sell the rest until he found out who was behind it. The captain's back was creepy. The man was completely confused. He had never thought that something like this would happen here. Arthur said that in that case, he would be in the Korean section and would be taking a big loss. Randall smiled. He understood. In addition, Arthur said that even if the customer was determined, he would not sell to the alliances of Divine Star and Ellen. The man sitting somewhere upstairs asked, "What was the reason for all this?" Arthur faltered a little. After thinking for a couple seconds, the guy replied that the reason was because he just didn't like them. His eyes were smiling. Suddenly, a representative from the East approached him and asked, since Arthur was a Chaos player trading through direct exchanges, was not possible. In such a case, Rendall is willing to provide the entire amount, immediately provided Arthur with a bag of gold coins. The guy was even taken aback. He, of course, accepted in his hands, but was still surprised. This man was willing to part with such a huge amount of money without any intermediaries. Looking at this man, Arthur even felt a little ashamed that he wanted to run away as soon as he got the amount. He held out the promised goods to the buyer, and the man gratefully accepted the stone, so either way, he got the money and had nothing more to worry about. In response to Arthur's interest in what he was going to do with the object, Randall looked at him with a look that made him feel sick. Meanwhile, the man said he was using it as decoration. Arthur even swallowed his tongue. This is a joke. Meanwhile, the man said he was using it as decoration. Arthur even swallowed his tongue. This is a joke. The Easterner said he had some thoughts on this stone. Arthur was wary. With a little sadness in his voice, Randall said that there are many needy people in this world, suffering from hunger and other hardships. And there are also children who are not able to go to normal education. He wants to reach out to these people. His company is in the business of giving everyone in need what they need. However, with money alone, it would be difficult to solve this issue. And so having a stone in his hands, he thinks he can realize his plan. Lastly, the man said that he had always grown up royalty and had everything he needed, so it was worth taking on more responsibility. Arthur was completely satisfied with this answer. According to his beliefs, this was the perfect world. It seems the guy was not wrong. Huang, who was in the office, was furious. He couldn't believe that Arthur had 3 black stones. It was unthinkable, but his ward assured me that this information was true, so there's no doubt about it. The man asked, "What became of the one who was sent to riot? All traces were covered." The deputy assured me that everything was fine, even if someone started digging into them. They could never know the truth. The warden sighed heavily, but that was fine. The only question was where Arthur had gotten the 3 black stones. If he's announced he has such a treasure, then there are many more of these stones than Arthur said. The principal even broke a pen out of anger. That guy is absolute evil, the true embodiment of a nightmare. He fell back in his chair, but it's still a real black stone. Plus, there's 3 of them. It is simply incomprehensible. The man agonized over what to do in such a situation. With a bitter end, the auction was over. They had quite figured it out, although they didn't get to find out who was behind this inhumane act of attack. With a satisfied expression on his face, Arthur evaluated the money he had received, and with such a fortune, he could not deny himself anything at all. Appearing out of nowhere, Serdian marveled at the Lord. Once again, he was simply marvelous. Arthur looked at her over his shoulder. Before he could talk to his assistant about anything, Arthur needed to check something out, and later they would have a conversation. Turns out that out of the remaining 3 people, 2 recognized him as an absolute, but how is that possible? Suddenly started flashing. Luxo wary, someone had broken in here again. Arthur looked up. What happened again? Rexor the man appeared in front of them and landed on the ground, and it immediately shook from his power. He said he'd never bow his head to some brat in his life. It's beneath his honor. The man thrust his sword forward and said he challenged Arthur to a duel. Let him prove his strength to him. The player was a little shocked. What does all this even mean? Duel? What the hell is a duel? What kind of circus is this? Rexor managed his ardor a bit and said that today they were watching the auction, and 2 of those who came recognized Arthur as their lord. Elders look inside a person's character and assess whether he is worthy to be called their lord first, which would be charisma and wisdom. Next is ambition and determination, to the extent that a person can make life choices. And Rexor judges people on strength. To the rest of the elders, Arthur has shown his good sides, so can he surprise him too? Luxo, after this, came to a rage. He was ready to tear his colleague. His words were too impertinent. If he says he saw the actions of the Overlord, then he must understand everyone else and why they came to serve Arthur. The elder then looked at Johann, why he was suddenly quiet and not saying a word. After all, he was the one who had convinced the elder to take his time and wait a bit this time too, thinking of ways to change his mind. Or maybe Johann is going to fight the elder instead of the challenger, but the assassin stood motionless and said nothing. He was just about to move forward when Arthur, in a booming voice, stopped all this arguing, and everyone must stop. This is exactly the obstacle Arthur must overcome alone, so let the others have no interference. Arthur said he had speculation about this elder, but Rexor proved too flashy that one showed up. A smile appeared on the elder's face. He is not going to serve someone weaker than himself. Zeta asked the nearby Johann if their overlord had any chance of winning. Even the assassin hesitated a bit. He doubted. He realized that the overlord was much stronger, but he was still confident that he could handle Rekor, but there was no choice but to trust in his overlord. Arthur was well aware that his opponent was a first-class mercenary, specializing in surprise attacks. But in hindsight, the lad remembered Eddard, who had joined him completely, for natural reasons as well as Johann. In short, so far, the game had only allowed him to fulfill scenarios that were within his capability. In that case, there was a chance to win. Arthur prepared himself, and a dark aura formed around his body. He was serious. Smiling, Rexor drew his sword and asked not to be disappointed if Arthur called himself Lord. The player snapped his fingers irritably and said that for an assassin, Rexor talks too much. It's time to get down to business, because he's got a lot on his plate. No sooner had the guy put his fingers back down than his opponent began to move with such speed that even with his eyes it was difficult to catch his movement. Suddenly a man whizzed past the R2 once with such speed that he managed to hit it, and blood appeared on his cheek. At that moment, Arthur realized that he was indeed in a dangerous situation, for what this man's specific intentions are to destroy him. Arthur could see his opponent's silhouette forming behind him, but there was still a way to defeat him. The elder had already lowered his sword, and Arthur noticed at the last moment the blade coming towards his face. The others who were watching the battle from the sidelines were horrified. However, Johann is the only one who remained sane. He said to stay calm is far from over. Rexor was confused. He did, after all, hit right at his opponent. So, what happened? The man noticed with horror that Arthur was holding his sword with one hand, not too careless of his opponent's behavior. It was only a moment before Rexor was already flying in the opposite direction. At a tremendous speed, Arthur was incredibly strong. The player said that his opponent will not go to the other world, but it will hurt a lot for a while. Shocked to the core, Johann ran up to his overlord and congratulated him on the amazing victory the man had not expected.